It is May 3rd, 2023. The time is 6:31 p.m. Our mission is to provide a safe and caring climate and culture in which we engage, inspire, educate, prepare, and empower all learners in partnership with their surrounding community to be successful in today's and tomorrow's society. Mr. Dorholt, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag, to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Then can you please call roll?
Following board members are present at the District Administration Office. Heather Weems,
Here.
Monica Shigeru-Swartz,
Here.
Shannon Haas,
Here.
Zach Dorholt is here, Al Dahlgren,
Here.
Natalie Copeland,
Here.
Scott Andresen.
Here.
The following cabinet members and staff are present at the District Administration Office. Superintendent Dr. Lori Putnam, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Education Kay Nelson, Assistant Superintendent of Elementary Education Dr. Mike Rivard, Executive Director of Operations Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services Amy Scalrud, Director of Innovation and Instructional Technology Ryan Cox, Media Technicians Paul Novak and Gordy Scott, Custodian on site Steve Hain. The following cabinet members and staff are virtually present. Director of Community Engagement and Communications Tammy DeLand, Executive Director of Community Education Adam Holm, Executive Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations Tracy Flynn Bowe, Director of Equity Services Ian Omar, Executive Director of Research Assessments and Enrollment Donna Roper, Executive Assistant Jan McGuire.
Thank you. Next, I'm looking for approval of tonight's Board of Education meeting and work session agenda.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion by Scott and a second by Natalie. Zach, can you please call vote?
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholtz, yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Monica Shigeru-Swartz,
Yes.
Heather Weems,
Yes.
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
Thank you. Next is the consent agenda. The consent agenda consists of non-controversial items that the board adopts routinely without debate. Any single member may remove an item from the consent agenda by requesting removal at the time the consent agenda is moved for adoption. On tonight's consent agenda, item A, approval of personnel staff changes. B, approval of monthly treasurer's report for March 2023. C, approval of monthly financial report for March 2023. D, approve HVAC project change order, total $695. E, discovery HVAC project change order, total $1,042. And item F, Oak Hill HVAC project change orders totaling $2,065.70. Does any member wish to remove an item from the consent agenda? And I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
So move.
Second.
And again, have a motion by Scott and a second by Natalie. Zach, can you please call vote?
Zach Dorholtz, yes. Shannon Haas,
Yes.
Monica Shigeru-Swartz,
Yes.
Heather Weems,
Yes.
Scott Andresen,
Yes.
Natalie Copeland,
Yes.
Al Dahlgren.
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on then, we have one discussion action item. It's an action item, non-public transportation boundaries, presenting tonight Gary Ganji, Executive Director of Operations.
Good evening, Chair Haas, Superintendent Putnam, members of the Board of Education. This evening, I am going to give a brief transportation overview, and then we are going to ask you to take action on an administrative recommendation for non-public school boundaries. Just a little bit of overview that will help the discussion here. Our transportation system is considered a three-tier system, which means a little after 6 a.m., our buses go out to pick up our elementary students. Once they drop the elementary students off, they go back out and pick up secondary students. Once they're finished with that, they go back out and pick up some of our students from alternative programs, from charter schools, and from early childhood. And then in the afternoon, we repeat the process. And so the buses are really running pretty much from 6 in the morning till 5:30 at night. We get a lot of use out of them. And we transport District 742 students, non-public students, and charter school students. As you know, we've had some driver shortages along with other labor shortages this year, but we have really been looking for efficiencies when it comes to what we can do for transportation. Our transportation needs keep increasing, and once we hire a bus driver and they begin, with all of the training and licensing, it takes 4 to 6 weeks for that bus driver to be in a bus. So it's quite a long process, and so we look for how can we retain drivers and how can we keep building that bench so that we can replace drivers when we need to. As we've looked at efficiencies, we've looked through the whole system. And the recommendation that we are bringing you this evening is based on some of our findings. For our non-public aid that we get for transportation, we get just under $160,000 a year. We use a company to do our routing, and they do some of our billing for us, some of our business work. And they estimate our costs for transporting non-public students at a little over $730,000 a year. And so what that amounts to is we're spending about $570,000 more than we're bringing in to pay for that transportation. And so we're looking at how can we bring down that cost. So we have some commitments, and these commitments are based on statute. They're based on board policy. We transport all students living with 1 mile or greater from the school that they are attending, or the school in that attendance area, I should say. So that would be a Madison student that's a mile or more beyond Madison. We would transport that student. State statute says 2 miles. Our board policy says 1 mile. And in my opinion, that is good. I'm glad that we aren't sticking to the 2 miles, because 2 miles is a long way for a student to walk, regardless of the age. And we provide the same level of service for all students, whether the student is a District 742 student, whether the district attends one of the charter schools, or the student attends a non-public school. We get a little bit of latitude when we route to try to put this together in 3 tiers, cover 250 square miles, and get all of the students to and from school safely. We are able to set the school bell times. And so if we need to run a 3rd tier, we get to say, these schools are on the 3rd tier. Your school day will start at this time and end at this time. And we also get to set school transportation boundaries, and that's what we're here to talk about this evening. Historically, for our non-public transportation, we have had elementary boundaries. This goes back before I was involved in transportation. It's long-standing. And so we're talking mainly our Catholic non-public schools. We have a number of schools in the area. Just like we have a Madison, Westwood, Oak Hill boundary, we have boundaries for all of our Catholic non-public elementary schools. We do not have boundaries for our secondary non-public schools currently, and that's what we're bringing to you this evening. So this evening, we're bringing 2 things. The first one is there is an area in the St. Wendelins boundary that is in District 742, but it's not on the boundary, and we need to transport from there. And this year, we found out because we had some families in that area. This is out by Marty, out in that area of the county. And it just makes sense that we would expand that to pick up those students, which we are transporting those students, by the way, but we need to get it in the boundary. The second modification has to do with our Catholic high schools. Right now, it doesn't matter where you live in the District 742 boundaries, we're transporting to either Cathedral or St. John's Prep. And what our administrative recommendation is that we would provide the same level of transportation that we're providing our 742 students in the secondary schools. So we have a tech boundary and we have an Apollo boundary. If you reside in the tech boundary more than a mile from school, we transport. Same for Apollo. And so what we're bringing forward is administrative recommendation that the Cathedral boundary would follow our tech boundary, and our St. John's Prep boundary would follow the Apollo boundary. This will save us 3 bus routes. Bus routes are, forgot to check your name, 70? About $80,000. With Amy, I always estimate low, she goes a little higher, so we'll use her number. So roughly $240,000 savings there. And really what we would do is, it's a resource. We have a need for those routes. Questions?
Do we also transport to St. Cloud Christian School?
Yes,
Okay.
and so I'm going to use Prince of Peace as an example. So Prince of Peace, there is not another elementary school of that denomination, and so then we need to transport across the whole district. And so we cover all of the district for that school and St. Cloud Christian.
Say that again.
So
Because there's 2 choices for Catholic schools versus,
Catholic schools have 6 choices, yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
For high school?
No,
Oh,
no,
yeah,
high
for
school,
elementary school.
it's, just elementary.
The Prince of Peace is just K-8, and then St.
Correct.
Cloud Christian School is P-12, I think, so. Yeah, so we're just talking about secondary today, but not including St. Cloud Christian School.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Scott?
What were we doing with this Wendelin expansion before we've been doing this? Or what are we doing?
It has never come up, and so I speculate that we didn't have anyone living in that area attending that school, and then when someone moved, the question came up this year.
Thank you.
Can you just share the communication that's happened thus far with the Catholic schools?
Yes, we had a meeting last week. We have an annual meeting with our non-public schools. We reached out to them for the meeting. We had the meeting. Following the meeting, we sent the information, the maps that you received with the explanation, and explained that we would be bringing it to the board tonight with this administrative recommendation.
One was their pushback, and then secondly, who then is responsible for the communication of the plan if approved? Is it the Catholic or the non-public schools communication? Like, where do questions get directed?
Yes, so the communication would go out from them to their families. Some of the schools have asked us for ridership lists so that they would have it. And the questions would probably go back to them, but they could come to us and we'd be glad to address them. Yeah.
For Cathedral, are we having stops that are outside in the tech boundaries, but 1 mile outside of Cathedral, or is it just the whole tech boundaries?
No, so it's based on the school you attend, so the 1 mile would be from Cathedral.
Cathedral, okay,
Correct,
so,
yes.
but within the tech boundaries?
Correct, yes.
And then, obviously, the prep school, then, 1 mile doesn't take you very far. So can students who live in the tech boundaries then go to an Apollo area bus stop to get on that bus to go? Is that okay?
No, because we transport from their address of their residence, and we don't do that for the 742 students either.
Well, we pick up people from their houses?
No, it's based on,
Their-
their address
Okay.
is where we calculate the mile, and then, their
Okay.
bus stop might be at the end of the block or, something like that. But no, we don't have 742 students that go to a bus stop so they could go to a different school.
Well, so devil's advocate, say there's a bus stop on, well, it wouldn't be University, 12th and 29th that's going to the prep school. Can the person that lives, you're saying no, even if there's 2 kids already at that bus stop?
Right.
We can't do that, because I know we don't do that here, and I remember discussing it with you,
Right.
and it made sense at the time. To that, but we're saying no.
No, and we have to start routing now for next year. And so we take a
Team
look at
members.
where everyone lives, and then we base our routes on that. And then we also do opt-ins and opt-outs so that we can use those buses as efficiently as we can, and that we don't get the buses over capacity.
Monica?
Hi, Carrie, thank you. So can you explain to me how does the charter schools work?
For transportation? So I brought my friend Amy. A little different funding.
So charter schools are very similar, where we have an obligation to transport for charter schools. The difference is that the way the charter schools laws are written is that the state considers each charter school a unique school that has a different function and mission and kind of structure and reason for being an existing charter school. And so there are no boundaries that can be set for charter schools. So the charter school piece when it comes to transportation is actually financially even a bigger consideration than the non-public because we can't set boundaries. We have to transport across our entire district geographic area for every charter school. So we currently get about $555,000 in revenue for charter school transportation, and we spend, was it 1.7 million?
Correct.
We spend about 1.7 million to transport our charter school students.
So you can add this one to your subsidy.
Yep.
So Gary, my question about the charter schools, I didn't know that we had to do it. So my question is how does that work? Because we are transporting kids from all over to those charter schools. How is that working? I don't know if you can explain that in a few words, but.
Yeah, so some of it has to do with geography, where the schools are located. We just started to transport Athlos this year. And in the past, we had Stride, which was close to Tech. And so what we've been doing is we've been transporting some of the Stride students on Tech routes. And so we get younger students with older students, which is not always ideal. But just, again, because of the footprint that we cover, we needed to do that. When Athlos reached out for us to do their transportation this year, we couldn't bring them into our first tiers, so we're running a third tier where we're transporting Athlos, and so we needed to add 9 buses for that this year. Excuse me, 9 bus routes.
meaning that we are transporting kids from Atlas only, so those buses with Atlas kids go only with those kids. They're not District 742 kids on those buses.
Correct, correct. Because they're third tier, and we have other transportation for our third tier, which a lot of our third tier is special transportation.
So just for clarity's sake, per state statute, District 742 is responsible for transportation but cannot charge back any of these fees.
Correct. And really, we're responsible if they choose to have us transport, which financially, if their cost to transport is more than the revenue they're generating, they're clearly going to then opt for us because now that shortfall falls on us versus them. But the way the current statute is written, if they elect to have us transport, can't deny that. They have, is it March 1st?
March 1st unless they're.
March
new
1st
charters.
that they have to make that election with which all of ours did re-elect for next year. And then to make matters worse, if there's a new charter school opening, they have until July 1st. Well, by July 1st, routing is done by and large. So then if we do have a new one, we're really then restricted to how do we fit that in. It becomes much harder to do that with any sense of overlap or efficiency at that point. But yeah, there is no statutory authority for us to bill back that cost to them.
And then that comes ultimately from general fund.
Yes.
We have several transports in addition to ourselves. How does this impact them?
It extended their day this year. All of our contractors are doing the Athlos runs, and so it did extend their day and they needed more drivers because of it. So I would say it impacts across the whole system. I'm sorry, Scott, was your question specifically to charter schools or to the boundaries?
To the boundaries.
To the boundaries, next year when we, for the routing for next year, they may have different routes that they run, would probably be the biggest impact for that.
And then another piece too that has been challenging particularly with Athlos and that third tier, is that third tier is overlapping with our need for activities transportation. And so that's been the main barrier for us this year with being able to provide that resource for our families because we don't have drivers to run activity routes and activity buses after practices because they're still out on routes bringing charter school students home.
So, so ultimately then, we provide less service to the activities because there's no other alternative.
Right, it's creating not only a funding shortfall, but a resources allocation issue that's negatively impacting our kids from that standpoint too.
So 100% of the per pupil, 8,000, whatever per pupil goes to the charter school?
So we get the transportation portion, which is about 700 and something
Okay.
per pupil,
Oh,
but
okay.
the amount that we generate per pupil for those charter school students equates to about that 555,000, but
Doesn't actually cover it.
that's nowhere close. And in some districts, that might be an equitable and a reasonable allocation. If you have one, or two small charter schools or small non-publics where you have the ability and capability of having those on commingled buses and they're really cost sharing.
Yeah, and you don't have the big.
Right, but just
area
the
that we do.
sheer numbers of students and the geographic area that we cover just doesn't make that realistic for us to be able to do it within that the funding that's generated.
So it's a one-size-fits-all funding,
Correct. Yep.
transportation funding that doesn't fit us.
Yes.
Got it.
It's probably a longer discussion, but explain to me, if you can, how you cannot use state or federal funds for a religious school, right? So Cathedral or any of the other religious schools do not receive federal funding or state funding. However, when it comes to transportation, it falls, I mean, I don't care what they say, we're paying for it. So there's state funding or federal or state funding that goes into busing students to private schools. How does that fall within the law?
That is a good question. And there are other instances, right, where services are provided to non-publics, but both versus, from state funding for guidance and nursing services, and then there's federal components of our title funds. The difference, the distinct difference is that those other laws that do that limit the amount that we spend on the revenue that's specifically generated for them. And so that doesn't create that cross-subsidy or that shortfall. I don't think that's an answer or a question we can answer. I think that's something that the legislature has to answer, because how does that seem to align with the intention of state funding?
Natalie, and then Heather, are you processing and ready?
What would be if the legislature was here, what would you say that you would want them to do? How would we need to change what's going on
For
now?
non-public or for charter or?
Just transportation in general,
I
the
mean,
issues
in
we're
a perfect
having.
world, it would be ideal that we aren't part of that equation, right? That those schools contract with transportation carriers directly and pay those costs directly. I understand that in some communities, their district transportation is the only transportation. But then in my mind, that should be a contracted situation. If there is still a funding component, that there's an ability to bill back the actual cost or that functional cross subsidy, so that we're not absorbing that out of our funds, because that's reducing what we can do from instructional resources, and they're not having to bear any of that. And so once again, we have less to spend per student on actual instructional resources compared to those other schools. So in a perfect world, we would be out of it altogether.
Yeah.
If there, is a requirement, I suspect statewide, they're gonna say that having the district not ever have to be a part of that or provide that resource, because some districts are the only option for a charter school, that ability to bill would be what I would advocate
Yeah,
for.
yeah, okay, thank you.
So we have until September, and we can write another resolution concerning this and present it to the MSBA, asking for that specific component to a legislative mandate that it would take it out of the hands of the public schools. So I mean, I understand what you're saying. I don't understand how they skirt the law on that one. It seems to me like they're intentionally breaking statute and just looking the other way. And again, this is one of those things that doesn't affect every district in the state. It affects us in a big way because there's so many Catholic schools within our community. But there are a lot of school districts that don't really have any Catholic schools within their community. So,
And we're a very large square footage of a district, and that makes it unique. I think Heather and then Natalie.
I was just going to say, I mean, to Al's point, doing something that is more legislative, I think, and helping people understand, because I'm assuming this is another area where, because of the size of our district and the types of students that we serve, ultimately it impacts the kids who we're trying to help the most, because it further takes from general fund dollars for education. And my assumption would be probably most people, and particularly smaller districts, just aren't aware. But even within our own district, I bet 95% of people don't understand how this operates.
So just to make sure that I'm saying this right, we have to provide special ed services for both charter and private, right? And then also Title I?
So we don't provide the special education services for charter school students. They provide it, however, they bill it back to us through the state tuition billing system. So we're essentially paying the majority of the cost. There's a percent that they cover, but the percent that they cover is smaller than the unfunded percent typically for the cost to serve our students. But we do have a financial obligation to provide the special education services. And then the same thing with the title services. Now, the title services is one of those where, similar to the non-public counseling and nursing services, the amount of service we provide is limited to the funding that they're generating. So it's not creating a cross subsidy like it is in the special education and the transportation side.
Okay, so those are the two areas in both charter and private schools that are causing a cross subsidy for us, is transportation and,
So transportation would be both. A special education, if they attend a private school, that there is a small piece of the special education cross subsidy because we do provide that service. I would say that's a relatively small percent of our special ed cross subsidy, but it is a component of it.
okay. I was just asking that because if we're going to talk to the legislature and we only talk about transportation, but we don't talk about the special ed funding, then that seems like we better just talk about it all. All right.
Kind of, I mean, we'll see where we end up, but we kind of are because we're gonna go, I believe, asking for MSBA to get behind a cost-based system. So basically, we're essentially going down there with what Jerry's asking for in the lawsuit and saying this is our position and putting it into a resolution and trying to get MSBA to either say that they are in support of full funding or they are not in support of full funding. Because right now they all
Okay. What's that?
It's an equal treatment clause, so that would, because we require state mandate children to attend public school. So that's the mandate placed upon parents. So that's where it holds its water.
That's where the transportation things holds its water?
If the state's gonna make them go to school, that's the minimum we can do for them. I mean, it goes back that far.
That's great, but we're not making them go to that school.
Correct? No, I agree. I agree.
So
It's an old law, so maybe we can change it.
Don't know if you don't try.
Okay. Well, thank you. So this is an action item tonight. That administration is recommending approval of an expansion of one of the non-public elementary school transportation boundaries and the addition of non-public secondary transportation boundaries. Yes, please.
I would move that we approve the proposed new non-public transportation boundaries. And that would include both for the private high schools and the addition of the St. Wendelin area.
Second?
Okay, I have a motion by Al and a second by Scott. Any further discussion? Okay, Zach, can you call vote?
Al Dahlgren,
Yes.
Zach Dorholz, yes. Shannon Haas.
Yes.
Monica Shigera Schwartz.
Yes.
Heather Weems.
Yes.
Scott Andresen.
Yes.
Natalie Copeland.
Yes.
All right, thanks. We look forward to furthering that other conversation. Okay, moving on to reports. We have the Board of Education Standing Committee reports. I believe we have two Board Development Policy Governance Committees, Chair Scott Andreasen. Do you have a report?
Yes, the committee met on April 26th. Gary Ganji, Kay Nelson, Mike Rivard reviewed the following board policies with committee members. Board committee members discussed them and made recommendations. Board policy 805, waste reduction and recycling. Mr. Ganji presented a brief overview of the board policy 805 on recycling and will be coming back to the board development committee on May 24th. He'll be reaching out to board members to see if they do have any questions about this policy, and it's currently up for the 3-year review. Board policy 209, the code of ethics, to follow up from last month's meeting. Board policy 209 will be placed on the consent agenda at the next meeting. There will be a change in the pronoun usage in the policy to be gender neutral. As one of the 200 policies, it will come back in the consent agenda. And then board policy 203.2, order of the regular school board meeting. Dr. Rivard will be presenting board policy 203.2 at our next meeting, as there is a minor change to the policy. And finally, no changes are recommended for the following policies and will be noted as reviewed by the board development with recommended no changes. And that would be board policy 904, the distribution of materials on school district property by non-school persons, and board policy 907, rewards. That's the report.
Thank you. And then Board Finance and Audit Committee, Chair Al Dahlgren.
Yes, Board Finance and Audit Committee was busy. We've met twice since our last meeting. At the first meeting, which was on the item on the agenda, was McKinley and space concerns at McKinley. Lori gave an overview of the current space situation at McKinley High School. Currently, we're one of the largest ALC programs in the state and have seen a significant increase in the number of ALC students in need of credit recovery post-pandemic. In addition, the current RISE location, which is the middle level ALC, isn't meeting some of the program needs for space and administrative support. For this reason, next year we will be bringing RISE back to McKinley. Amy provided information on possibilities for meeting the space needs. An addition of 4 rooms would likely be around $2.5 million, and 6 rooms would be $3 to $4 million. There's a $1 to $2 million, let's see, there'd be two ways to finance it. One would be to use ESSER funds, which we have that need to be spent within the next year. And the second way would be there's $1 to $2 million available in lease levy before the cap is reached. It would be possible for us to use ESSER funds for the bulk of it and then supplement that with a small amount of lease levy so that the combination of the two would be able to fund the additional space needs there. Let's see, this would be a good use for the ESSER funds due to the higher need programming. Since we're seeing an increase of credit recovery needs as we came out of the pandemic, MDE approval would be needed for the use of ESSER funds. The committee agreed we should have an architect and/or construction manager provide a more accurate and proposed layout and budget. Once we have that, we can submit the proposed project to MDE for approval out of ESSER funds. I also asked if we could just review the bathroom upgrade scheduled for this summer in the context of an addition and see if we would want to do anything different. The question was also raised about if construction could begin this year so that the footings were in before the ground freezes in the fall and there could be winter construction. This is going to come back to Finance Committee at a later date to follow up on these items and discuss next steps. but that's something that could be coming forward to the board in the future. And then we met again this past Monday. And I'm not going to go through that one because we covered the preliminary budget, and Amy's going to go through that in detail, so.
Okay, thank you.
Question, is there any chance of getting the construction at least started before winter comes? So get those footings in? Has there been any thought on that? You mentioned something about it. It would be nice if we could get it done this summer, get started this summer.
I don't have an answer on that. We just asked them to look into that.
Thank you.
Okay. Then we have future agenda items. May regular board meeting topics will include summer learning opportunities, approval of list of graduates for Apollo and Tech High Schools, the Minnesota State High School League report, and some policy readings. At this time, does any board member want to suggest a future agenda item? Okay, and Monica, did you hear or know that the recycling is working its way through board policy?
Yes, but
Well, can we save the but for when it surfaces? Great. Okay, that was the last item on our regular agenda, so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn our board meeting.
So move.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
I
Opposed? Okay, so our regular board meeting is adjourned at 7:13 PM, and we're opening up our Board of Education work session. First up, we have District 742 Fine Arts Education Update. And welcome Laura Stebner, Director of Elementary Curriculum. Glad to have you.
Thank you, Chair Hawes, Superintendent Putnam, board members. Laura and I are excited tonight to have the opportunity to share some highlights of our district arts program. We're also joined by a few guests tonight. We welcome representatives from Walker West Music, who have begun a 3-year collaboration with us to help us diversify our music program. And so with us tonight, we have Executive Director Braxton Halsey, Program Director Latia Cardenas, Project Director Diane Snodgrass, and they will be joining our presentation a little later to share the work that's already been started. We also have 2 members of our equity team, Ayan Omar and Barika Davis, who have also been involved in that project. So we thank them for being here. So we wanted to start off with an affirmation about the value of the arts in our schools. And this quote by Michelle Obama is powerful, and we thought you might find it valuable as well. So I would like to start with reading this. As I've said many times before, arts education is not a luxury, it's a necessity. It is really the air many of these kids breathe. It's how we get kids excited about getting up and going to school in the morning. It's how we get them to take ownership of their future. And most importantly, it's how we get them to go to college. And the QR code on the right, if you're interested, is another list of resources and websites, and just that shares some of the value of arts if you're interested in looking at that. And tonight we're going to actually highlight 3 programs: our visual arts, our theater, and our music program. And I'm going to hand it off to Laura, who is going to cover visual arts and theater.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'm excited to start with the visual arts. And so you're going to notice the mural on the screen, and you may recognize it from Tech High School. This was a mural that our tech students did with Willis C. Tynes, who is a multimedia artist, and the students at Tech High School have worked with this artist before, with our teacher Jennifer Furt. She's worked with our students and the artists, and actually many other 742 students. And this was just something we wanted to highlight and share because it was very meaningful to our students, especially coming out of COVID, returning back to Tech High School, and just seeing that really visual message that you do matter as part of the school environment. This infographic has a lot of information regarding the arts, and I won't go through it all, but arts is really about educating the whole child. And so one of the few things that I wanted to call out was that we see some things like creativity that we would probably recognize as a benefit of arts, but we also notice things like problem solving, organization, communication, being fluent with technology are all benefits of the arts programming. And so we're proud to have such robust arts programming because we know it does go beyond the basic things that we think about when we think of art and really does help our students grow in many skills that help them throughout their whole life. Visual arts is one of the first pieces that we'll start out with tonight. And visual arts is, like I said, something that is important to the development of the whole child. And so it's an important component of our academic experience. At the elementary school level, students participate in art each week with 50 minutes of art class. The student you see on the screen is one of the artists who is featured in our Vera W. Russell Art Gallery, and I will talk a little bit more about that partnership with St. Cloud State in just a little bit. As part of the arts curriculum in the elementary, students are able to do a wide variety of skills, including painting, drawing, sculpture, weaving. Students are working with textiles, just a very broad variety of opportunities within the art classroom to engage in arts. From there, our students move into middle school, and we have some artwork featured by our very talented middle school students here. Our students have an opportunity to do some artwork that's a little bit more complex at that middle school level. So here we're featuring some drawing and painting, but also ceramics as part of the curriculum at that middle school level, allowing students to have an opportunity to move from sculpture to ceramics as they move from elementary to secondary. And this is a fun one. This is an opportunity for students to engage in some digital media. So this is from our middle school artists. And this is a cut paper animation activity where students are creating a character out of construction paper or pulling a character from a magazine, using their Chromebooks to photograph that character, and then using an animation website to make a GIF or a GIF, however you prefer to say that word, of the characters. So just a really fun opportunity for students to use technology and 21st century learning to engage in the arts. And then as we move into high school, we're proud to offer very robust programming all across the board. So we have courses that are the basic arts foundations all the way up to our AP arts courses in which students are able to earn college credit for the arts programming. And the high school allows students to take it to the next level. Not only are they participating in arts within the school day, they also have the opportunity to engage in art club, which meets after school weekly, to be part of community art collaborations, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Really just have that great opportunity to engage in art competitions as well. So students who are passionate about the arts have a wide variety of classes and then extended opportunities beyond the school day. I mentioned the Vera W. Russell Art Gallery Showcase, and this is one of our collaborations that allows us to showcase art from our K-12 students. And so this is a program where students in St. Cloud are able to have their art put on display. And this is in the education building at St. Cloud State University. And so if you've ever walked through the education building, you've probably noticed this artwork. Some of it is just stunning and cute and adorable, and it just runs the spectrum. But the art is up year-round in the education building, and it is able to be enjoyed by our St. Cloud State students. But then also the Vera W. Russell Art Gallery show is an opportunity for students to bring their parents to showcase the art. And this is actually a partnership that we've had for 10 years. And so it's exciting to share with you tonight that we've been able to feature the art of 3,000 St. Cloud area students through this partnership with SCSU. And another thing that we're excited to be bringing back is Gallery 742. So years ago, when we were at district offices were at Apollo, there was Gallery 742, which meant that throughout the hallways of our district offices and in some of our meeting rooms, we featured the art of our students, and we rotated that art regularly to provide opportunities for all schools to have art showcase. We haven't had that here at the district office yet, but it is coming. So we are currently working on bringing Gallery 742 back. And some of the artwork will be displayed here in this meeting space, as well as in other spaces throughout our district office as a way to really brighten up the space, but honor the artistic abilities of our students. Before we go to theater, I just wanted to say that that our students really do work with just some passionate, exceptional art teachers who are committed to ensuring that our students have an exceptional experience in the art classroom. The next area we'll touch on is theater, and theater is one of the great opportunities for our students here in District 742. Many of our students are on stage acting in our programs, and so at the secondary level, each of our secondaries performs 1 to 2 shows per year, and here are some flyers and photos from those shows. Gives students the opportunity to engage in extracurricular activities and enjoy the theatrical arts. Beyond the secondary, we are so excited that this year we were able to have stage experiences for our elementary school students. These are students from Madison and Mr. Moss, who's a 5th grade teacher at the bottom playing King Triton. These students were able to engage in this partnership with Great Theater, where Great Theater did a play in a week with the students. These are 5th grade students who were able to have that full experience, costumes, songs, lines, and the whole thing within their school day. And it was a great way to introduce students to theater, and so for some students who may not have had that experience before. And we were able to get just a very powerful quote from one of the teaching artists, so I wanted to read that to you today. One of the teaching artists said, "Seeing kids in their element, kids who a week ago maybe didn't even know this was their element, is the most exciting thing of all. Kids who have trouble focusing in class carried this show. Kids who are known as shy sang solos in front of a crowded room. Kids who struggle with making friends grouped up, grabbed hands, and jumped together chanting. And the smiles and sheer joy is an energy we wish for us all. It was a positive and fulfilling experience for all." And so we're really excited to continue this partnership with Great Theater and to grow it even further.
All right, and with that, we are going to move our focus to music. We thought it would be great to be able to start with some words from our students.
What I enjoyed most about music class this year is that we got to learn how to play ukulele.
What I like about music is you get to make your own music, you get to do
Or just look at their cute face, mouthing words.
a lot of cute stuff. You get to play the pianos, you get to play drums, and you also get to play the guitar and the ukulele. I don't know what that word is, but it's another instrument.
My name's Claudia. I'm in 8th grade, and I love Miss Foster because she takes time out of her day to teach students.
That up, can we go to the finance committee? We missed one, so we'll give you a few minutes to pull that up. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I apologize. I missed one of the topics that we had at our last finance committee meeting, and I don't know why I missed it. But we had a discussion on parking fees and some conclusions or some ideas. After a discussion, it was decided to issue parking stickers to students and to staff that are to be visible from the rear of the car. Staff at Apollo and McKinley in the district office will be given parking stickers. Students at Apollo and Tech and McKinley can purchase parking stickers for $10. This sticker is good until they graduate. Stickers for additional student vehicles will be $5 each. So if you buy a parking sticker and then you buy a new car, you need a new sticker, it's $5, just to cover the cost of the sticker. The parking stickers will be good at Apollo, Tech, and McKinley. The sticker should have logo and the permit number, and it's going to have a Crush logo. And it'll be one sticker for the entire district, good at all schools. The sticker numbers will be attached to the specific vehicle, and the information will be kept maybe in Skyward. This will be on the board agenda for our next meeting, May 17th, as an information item with the public hearing tentatively set for June. It will go to the board as an action item to be approved after the public hearing in June. And I think you're having some of the Imagine 742 students come to present, because this has been presented to them since the Finance Committee meeting, and no? Okay. Okay, so they're hearing that tonight, but they're going to be involved in the process also. So we're essentially taking parking fees. The recommendation is to take parking fees from $100 a year to a $10 parking sticker that would be good for your entire term at the school, unless you get a new car. It would be $15 or $20, depending on how many cars you have, but $10 with a $5 additional sticker.
Okay, thank you. Any luck?
I'll hit play and we'll
Okay.
find out.
What I enjoyed most about music class this year is that we got to learn how to play ukulele.
What I like about music is you get to make your own music. You get to do a lot of cool stuff. You get to play the pianos. You get to play drums, and you also get to play the guitar and the ukulele. I don't know what that word is, but it's another instrument.
My name's Claudia. I'm in 8th grade, and I love Miss Boster because she takes time out of her day to teach students before school and after school.
My name is Jory, and I'm in 4th grade. My favorite thing about music class is that whenever we go there, every day we do fun activities.
My name is Miles. I'm in 4th grade, and my favorite thing about music class with Miss Bauer is the same as him.
My name is Yasir. I am in 5th grade, and the best thing I like about music class is the diversity.
What I enjoyed most about music class this year.
Well, let's try that. So we do have fabulous happenings in our music room. And first, we're going to feature just a few things from our elementary music programs. So students attend music weekly, and they engage in all kinds of music making, from performance to listening to understanding those fundamentals. Our music rooms are places where kids engage in lots of hands-on activities. They take a dive into exploring many different cultures and forms of music. And pictured here on the left-hand side, we see our budding Oak Hill musicians who are learning to play the ukuleles. And on the right, that's a picture of some of our students at Kennedy who are literally in hands-on experience learning those lines and spaces of music notation. Middle school provides the opportunity for students to be in more of a formal performance situation. So that's where our students have the opportunity to participate in band, choir, and orchestra. And those classes, of course, focus on the art standards, but the students also have the opportunity to showcase their work in 2 concerts per year. And we know that not every student wants to be on the stage and in performance, so we do have an alternate choice for kids, and that called Making Music. In Making Music, students again study various genres of music, whether it be West African, rock and roll, indigenous, hip hop, jazz, blues. They are engaged in that creation, improvisation, and performance within their own classroom. And as we move to the high school, we provide that more in-depth level for students. Again, they're participating in band, choir, orchestra, but we also have many interesting music electives that are offered to students. So we have AP Music Theory, we have guitar class, drumming, The History of Rock and Roll, and Introduction to World Music are all offerings. Our performing groups put on several concerts a year, but they also participate in regional and state competitions. One of the highest honors you can earn is as a musician, a high school musician, is being selected to one of the all-state ensembles. And this year, you probably will recognize on the left, India Ratha. I believe I shared this with you early in the year. She is a Tech High School student who was selected to participate in all-state band this year. On the right-hand side, that is a picture of the Tech Concert Choir at their solo ensemble contest, which was held in Little Falls this year, and that rotates through the region at school sites. Most recently, we had our Central Lakes Conference Honors groups get together, so select students from both Tech, Apollo, and other area schools all got together. They were able to work with a clinician, combine their efforts, and then each group had a concert that day. That being said, while we have all these great things happening, we also know there's room to grow, and that has been a focus of the district for the last few years, to really think about how we can diversify what we're doing for kids and really increase our student participation numbers. And so this year there was a big focus on finding those pathways to enhance our program and build those programs up. So next, we're excited to share some initiatives that we think are really going to do just that. That being said, right, great things take time to grow. So what we're looking at here are long-term initiatives. We want to make sure that we're putting things in place, we're providing the right professional development, and we're establishing programs that are going to grow over time. So one of the things that we did internally for the first time was take our high school performing groups out to all of our elementary schools and middle schools. I believe I shared a couple of pictures earlier again in the year of this, but that was a great success. Each group performed for the kids. They talked about what it was like to be in a performance group in middle school or high school, and they gave the students question and answer time. It was also a great way to build those connections across our school sites. So our music teachers are always thinking, and while we love that experience, they're thinking about other ways that they could enhance that experience to maybe make it more of a workshop type program where kids could come up and try instruments. They could interact more with the musicians, or perhaps even having some of our high school students push into our elementary classrooms and work with kids in that setting. Another celebration this year, of course, was the revival of our Night of the Stars, and we were so happy to bring this back after pausing due to COVID. As you know, this LEAF fundraiser raised over nearly $7,000 in ticket sales, and it featured all kinds of acts from across the district, our high school students down to our elementary students, which was a really big highlight, and again, it gave that opportunity for connections and showcasing all of our talents. We also have some community collaborations, which Laura talked about, also with Great Theater, and here are a couple more that we wanted to share. So some of our fine arts programming partnership came from the College of St. Benedict's and St. John's University. At McKinley, students were able to experience a theatrical one-person play called The Latecomer, a Hmong family memoir. The solo piece told an immigration story of the author's family who settled in Minnesota, and it really had a lot of resonance with some of our students. In addition to the actress, they provided a teaching artist who worked with those students to really get in and explore those themes of that play and tie it into writing and their own personal lives. And then the poster on the right is a hip hop group out of LA that entertained and worked with our Kennedy students earlier this year. So in addition to these two experiences, we also have a partnership we also provide experiences for kids going outside of the district. So on April 28th, all of our fifth graders are able to go over to St. Cloud State and listen to the St. Cloud Symphony Orchestra. And on May 12th, Kennedy North and South students are going to make a visit to the Paramount Center for Arts to watch a production of Call of the Wild. And our work with the Paramount Arts District is another important collaboration. And Amy Myron, who is the Director of Community Engagement, is really committed to working with us and is excited to explore whether we can have artist residencies, art galleries, or just bringing theater into our schools. So lastly, we want to outline 3 of our big partnerships. And I see Mariah Chamberlain came in here, and Mariah is a music teacher at Lincoln Elementary, and in addition to her teaching at Lincoln, next year she will serve as our music content specialist. So she will be heavily involved in some of these initiatives. So I'm going to just highlight the first 2, and then we are going to invite our guests up to the table to talk about our other one. So one, as we've talked about, one of our areas of focus is to increase our participation, and we have identified that need for our performing ensembles to better represent the kids that are in our schools. And so one of the gaps we've identified is that, like when Laura was presenting on the science of reading, our teachers have been taught in a really traditional style of teaching. So how can we expand our instructional practices to reach a different audience and to engage kids in a different way? And so that's the goal of all of these initiatives up here. The first one is led by the Department of Education. As you can see, it's called the Culturally Responsive Arts Education Programs Action and Learning Cohort. Say that 10 times fast. In a nutshell, this cohort is looking to help all Minnesota schools create local action plans that are focused on being culturally responsive and anti-racist in our curriculum, and how we can better program to meet the needs for today's kids. The second one is sponsored through the Purpose Center, and that's called the Minnesota Comprehensive Arts Planning Program, or CAP. That is a program we have applied to be part of, and we should be hearing here very shortly if we've been accepted. And the Comprehensive Arts Planning Program includes all of the arts areas, and so again, it's looking at building like a 3-year strategic plan for how we grow our arts programs and how we engage our community partners in meeting our kids' needs. And our last and very exciting opportunity is with Walker West Music, and so I'm going to turn it over to Laura, and she's going to introduce our guests and invite them to the table.
So these are our partners from Walker West. We'll have them come right up. I think maybe I'll have you sit here, Diane, so you can be close to the microphone. Thank you. And so I will let our friends from Walker West introduce themselves and tell you who they are. But I'm excited to share with you that we'll be talking about 2 things: what's already begun with this partnership and what is to come. So this is something that is in the works, and we've been working collaboratively for quite a few months now to really develop our vision for this partnership. So I will turn it over to Diane first.
Okay, you got it. You want to do intros and then the video?
Yeah, we're not following the rules. Follow the rules, you're in the school board meeting.
I'm Diane Snodgrass, and I'm the project manager for this partnership. You're going to hear from each one of us, and we're going to start with a short video of Walker West so that you can get an idea of who we are and what we do. So let's go ahead and roll that.
Well, the story that I've been told is that Carl was playing for his choir at a church event in South St. Paul, and Grant was playing for his choir at a church event. They began to talk when there was all the issues in the Selma-Dale a lot of violence. And because of their passion for music and how they had experienced children really getting into it, they felt that if they started a studio together, they could direct some of that energy in a positive way.
These men were like fathers and mentors, and they not only taught music, but they taught life values. They taught how to be in your body, in community, your identity, your culture, and those kinds of things, and the history of some of the music.
For me, music is not simply about learning songs or learning a piece or building technique. It is all of those things, but it is also about communicating and expressing oneself.
I think it's important that it comes from the right spirit, right? Music education comes from the human spirit, the spirit of joy, the spirit of enjoyment, and telling stories, and I think that's really important.
There are a number of different ways that you can approach music. The traditional conservatory approach, more of a Western European, maybe a classical approach, is that oftentimes it's a cerebral approach through understanding and through the head. And sometimes that approach doesn't recognize the other ways that music can be learned through your body, through your ears, an auditory approach, a kinetic approach, a spiritual approach. And Walker West takes all of those things in.
Playing music, it's connecting your mind and your body to produce a sound. It's deeper than that because it's kind of like meditation. You know, when I was first learning drums in band, they'd teach me the rudiments, and you know, just sitting there for minutes on end, hours on end, doing that, you can learn a whole lot about yourself. It's literally meditation. I kind of started loving music. It wasn't until roots like jazz, bebop, blues, R&B, all of that type of stuff, till I was able to really find my love for it, because I wasn't aware that all of the stuff that I was hearing, all of the stuff that I was surrounded by came from those genres. And it wasn't until I grew my love for those genres that I was able to grow my love for the genres that I previously hated.
When you come here, it doesn't matter if you're 6 or 60. It's just like, this is what you can do. And I'm going to show you this and that, and here's some new stuff to do. So you are not too old, and I just think that is a priceless gift that you can give to any person.
What Walker West is doing is about discovery. It's about expanding what we think we know about music and music education, about culture, and saying there's more that we can do, there's more that we can understand as it relates to music and community building and community development and empowerment and agency.
There is no perfect time or age. Music education can happen anytime, and all we need is the right spirit from you.
I continue to learn, and I continue to be able to have the opportunity to contribute to this very neighborhood and worldwide knowledge-building community.
The possibility of this institution, what it has been able to do in the past 30 plus years, but what it can is extraordinarily powerful.
This is just the perfect place and the perfect time to find an amazing music education at Walker West.
All right, the boss, Diane, told me I'm up, and she only gave me 3. Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay,
Yeah, I can hear.
good. First of all, thanks for having Walker West to come today, and Superintendent Putnam, and I think, were you Assistant Principal Kay?
Assistant Superintendent.
Superintendent, yeah. It's nice to see somebody outside of, really, for real. I'm gonna give you, I got my 3 minutes. You got my clock
Sorry,
on me?
it's okay.
Okay, all right, good. Yes, I want to first of all say, I love that brain slide that you showed, because music is a brain workout. It's like going to the gym. It's a brain workout. And then the other thing that you said in that slide that was really key that I really tuned in on, music is not a nice to have. It's a need to have. And I'll just give you my quick testimony. When I was a second grade, I was a D and F student. And they held me back. My mom enrolled me in piano, and I went from D's and F's to A's in 1 year and graduated from college on the dean's list. That's how important music is. And so since I've been Walker West almost 4.5 years now, we've really had a transformation. And what that transformation is, it really gets us to here today, because it used to be, if you want to take music lessons, yeah, you can come to 760 Selby in St. Paul and take those music lessons. But the transformation really was about engagement and community engagement. And, you know, we're going to have Katya here. She's now our new program director of Walker West Without Walls, because the whole thing of the transformation was, we got to get out of the building. We can't just sit here and wait for people to come to us. And so when Tracy called me and said, you know, we would like to talk to Walker West about this, at first I said, I'm going to share this with the team, and they're going to say, no, we're not going to St. Cloud. But to my surprise, there's some growth on that team. They said, yes, we ought to do that. And so within that, okay, I know my 3 minutes is coming, so I'll keep
you're
going.
fine.
Okay, all right, I'm rambling. But part of that transformation was community engagement and really getting out into our communities and going. We have a couple of residencies where we send our teachers to schools during the school day so that they can teach in those schools that don't have a music program. The second component of that strategic plan was about all ages, all generations, providing access to all people. So we have an early childhood music program, because we know that music helps with the brain, again, brain development and impulse control. And then on the flip side, you saw our choir. It's a dementia-friendly, Amazing Grace chorus, and I swear they need to be getting Grammy Awards. They're that good. And so we've made this transformation, which kind of brings us to where we are today. In 2021, we were finally awarded an award, the Regional Cultural Treasures Award, by the Ford McKnight Foundation for decades of providing arts and culture to Minnesota. So with that said, I know my 3 minutes is up. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Braxton. Ooh, were you on?
Who's got it?
So again, my name is Katya Cardenas. I'm the program director of Walker West Without Walls. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about some of the partnerships that we've done with schools in the St. Paul community, specifically focused on the neighborhood that we are in St. Paul, the Rondo community. One of the wonderful partnerships that we've done is with the Barack and Michelle Obama Elementary School, where we got to do a songwriting workshop with a local hip hop artist named Chadwick Phillips. He works with the students to create their own poetry in rhythmic form, so they get to write their own raps. They get to perform them. Sometimes they get to perform them for their peers. It's very exciting. We do weekly visits with these artists at schools throughout our community. And in addition to these programs, we've also gotten to do a video series called Music and Me. These are resources that are available to any schools who want to access them, and we do have curriculum that goes along with those videos that can take place in classrooms, and teachers can use those as a resource. Another partnership we have is with a local Catholic school called St. Peter Claver. They do not have a music education program, and so we are working with them on building that together. Diane actually goes on site and helps students go from playing 0 notes to 3 notes, and I'll tell you how the world opens up when they can learn 5 notes. It's a big wide world. One of the wonderful things that we try to focus on with these partnerships is access-oriented programming. So we're not just talking about taking them from 0 to 60, right? To get to that 5-note point takes a lot of work. It's literally months of work to get there. And so we're working with, like we said, creating rap. We're working with percussion, African drumming, with some wonderful local artists. And if you look at the second asterisk, students learn African drumming, vocal coaching, dance moves, storytelling. These are multifaceted skills that students are learning, and any student can participate regardless of their prior knowledge, while they're also deepening their cultural knowledge in music that informs so much of popular music that they hope to learn later on.
All right. That brings it to the nuts and the bolts of why we're here. And like I said earlier, I'm the project manager for this collaboration. We're in for the long haul, and there's a lot of work to be done, but I must say, we have a wonderful group of people from St. Cloud, the schools, also the community, and we are doing some hard work, and we're going to have a product that I think we're all going to be really, really proud of. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so this is a 3-year partnership, and year 1 is where we are now, and that's where I have the formation of this advisory team. We have 6, I'm just reading the PowerPoint, 6 teachers from here, from this district, 4 Walker West employees, 3 St. Cloud community members, and 2 St. Paul community members. We've done a lot of step-by-step talking. We have identified the target group of students that we would like to serve, and it is the 6th graders at North and South Middle School. The next step for that is to gather data to inform our programming and identify which student groups to serve, because you have your existing performing groups, your band, orchestra, and choir, and then you have your general music classes, which you call music makers, making music. That's so close. And then the group of C4 students. And so we're looking at who do we need to service, and how can we best get to the kids that we want to get to really make a difference. So that's what's happening currently. The next step for year 2 is that we come in and we do some professional development for the music teachers. And what this will look like is we will bring a team of people, and they will be artists that we would put in the schools, and sort of present a cafeteria style menu of workshops during the day. We want the teachers to experience what the students will be doing. We don't want to just tell them what we have. We want them to actually experience. So we will bring one of our African drum instructors. We will bring and drums, I guess, logistics. And who else do we have? We have some of the things that we teach. We teach the drumming, the songwriting. That's where I was drawing a blank. The songwriting, which was the rap that you saw. The songwriting, which is poetry, rap. We have something called teaching the Walker West way, which is a process of teaching instrumental music. And I'm a band director by training, and it turns it on its head a little bit, but not so much that people like me would be completely out of their comfort zone teaching, but it just looks at it a little bit differently. So those are some of the things that we will bring. The Music and Me video series would be another thing that we will do professional development on. So that's what will happen in our professional development for the music teachers. Year 2, we will implement some of the residencies for the 6th grade students. That won't happen right away because we want the professional development first, and then we'll start building programs around that. We then, in year 2, are going to need pre and post evaluations from students and also teachers, and we want data from the schools on who's starting in music, who's not continuing in music. Why? What can we do to support that? So all of this stuff happens during year 2, and then as we go into year 3, we just build on what we've done from year 2. Okay. So what does Walker West need from the St. Cloud Area School District? Well, we would like to have some on-site visits both ways prior to year 2 programming starting out. So that would mean that we would need to come into the schools and speak with the counselors at North and South Middle School and really look at the data and look at who's, like I said previously, who's staying, who's dropping, when is it happening, why is it happening. So if we have two main things that we're looking at. We're looking at these residencies and workshops that we're going to put in the schools. We're also looking at going into the music, the performing arts classes and seeing what we can do to support and what can we do to build some support within the community, like maybe partnerships with St. Cloud State, the high schools, and have some mentorships going on with those 6th grade students that maybe we can interrupt some of that frustration with not wanting to continue and that sort of thing. So we just started having a conversation about that at our last meeting, and that's not fully fleshed out. Not nearly as much as the workshops and the residencies, which we're very confident with. But we know there's another piece to this, and we want to dig into that too. But it will take, it will take us being able to sit down with the counselors at the schools and just say, what can we do to interrupt some of this? How can we support that? Yeah, so I think that is the crux of our work. We're really excited about being here. We see it as an opportunity to create something new and move the needle a little bit. I mean, that's what we're all here for. So thank you very much for allowing us to do this.
And I can just jump in as a member of the team. It's been great to just engage and to have, like Diane said, the deep conversations about where do we want to go, how do we want to dream, and we're meeting every other week. We meet in the evenings, and we really dig in so that it's designed to be what we're dreaming, what meets the needs of our kids, that we're really thoughtful and proactive in our planning. And so it's been a great partnership and experience so far from my vantage point.
I suppose we should ask if there are any questions, but I'm sort of afraid to ask.
I got you.
Yeah. Well, maybe I might just jump in real quick, because I think the uniqueness of Walker West is kind of what Diane talked about. You really can't engage learning, or you really can't teach if you don't engage the student. And so a lot of this is about how do you engage the student. And one of the things that we do, and this is using the African American culture, we do ear and eye training. And of course, if you're reading notes, that's eye training. But if you've ever been to a black church, you'll never see a sheet music on the organ or the piano. It's all in their head, and they become good listeners. And so we want our musicians to become good listeners as well as being able to read and sight read and do those type of things. And that's been kind of the magic of Walker West, is the ability to take these kids from the cities and bring them in and really engage. It's student-centered learning. For instance, I can look at my son, Winton. He's getting ready to go to Columbia College in Chicago. And I sent him to the jazz camp, and I was excited. I said, "How did you like that jazz camp?" And he just kind of rolled his eyes at me. He says, "Dad, I don't like jazz." And then he says, "Well, I want to play hip hop. I want to play neo soul, and I want to do that." And I said, "Well, and I want to play with Beyonce." I said, "Okay, all right, that's nice. All Beyonce's musicians are jazz musicians." Right? But the big thing about that is that we ask the student what they want to learn first. We don't just say, "Okay, you're going to have some Bach and Beethoven today." It's like, I think, when they met with my son, he says, what do you want to learn? I want to learn some Stevie Wonder. And so we started with Stevie Wonder, and he started playing some of that. And he says, okay, now here's some Frank Sinatra. He wasn't necessarily cool about that, but he got it. Oh, and then here's some of that Beethoven. We're not going to let you get away from all of that. But, you know, it's the way to engage the students so you can engage learning. And the other thing that's unique about Walker West, probably about 80% of our students are Black males. And you'll never run into an educational organization that has that many Black males. We have over 30 students teaching our kids. So I don't know, I kind of rambled on a little bit, but I thought I should just give you a little bit more context.
Thank you. Al?
Don't take my question wrong, because maybe it was just snoozing during a part of it or something. But I heard a lot of nuts and bolts about what we're going to do, and you talked about the dreams. We get together and talk about our dreams, but I don't know that I heard what are the dreams, and where are we, and where do we want to be at the end of 3 years, and if we continue on beyond that, what's the dream? Where are we going with this?
And I have
Okay.
a vision too.
All
I
right.
always have a vision.
All right. You can join me but I think the dream that we want more representation from the students of color in our music groups. I think that is the dream and that is the goal. How we're going to get there is through workshops and residencies, and even pushing into those, like when I identified the sixth graders as the core group of kids that we're going to work with, it's because that's when they start the band program, and that's when they start a lot of the new programs when they go to middle school. What can we do to, the challenge is to keep those kids sustained throughout high school. We can do what we can do at the 6th and the 7th and the 8th grade level, and we hope that sustains them and that gives them the confidence and the skills that they want to do as they move into the upper grades. And then the face of your bands and your orchestras and your choirs changes a little bit.
And I would add on that we see a lot of excitement and engagement in our elementary school music program. Some of the pictures we saw, the kids talking about what they love about music. We all know that kids go through a big transition from that 5th grade to 6th grade. There's a lot of things happening, and so we want to grasp onto that 6th grade year and just make that year as robust and powerful and connected to students as we can, because we see that as that pivotal point where if students turn away at 6th grade, rarely do they turn back. And so keeping that engagement and excitement, and then making our programs really meet the needs of our students. The engagement piece, meeting our students and helping them be very connected to music programming.
And then I guess my ad or my vision with this is, first of all, I have an instructor that always comes up with something wise. Because even in St. Paul, sometimes we have a hard time getting Black families to get involved in music. They don't sometimes see the value of music. And so, we've been working, when we first started school, we had 100% Black students. Now it's 45%. And so we're trying to grow that with our strategic plan. And one of the things that I think, for me, that drives it, because I gave my testimony earlier, is that, in Minnesota, we have the largest, whatever you want to call it, academic achievement gap between Black and white students, second largest in the nation. And I don't know what it's like in St. Cloud, but, I just really feel that the vision around this is not only just, sometimes, again, when you think about music as a nice to have and not a need to have, you think, oh, well, yeah, that's nice. That's nice for them to take some music. But what we're trying to do, we know that music makes us human. And, I always tell people every day, I'm not looking to have Grammy Award winning students, musicians or performers. I'm looking to have Grammy Award winning humans. And this is all about, enriching the lives of everyone. And quite frankly, especially for African Americans, music is in our DNA. During slavery, we communicated through songs. And so the ear training is really,
gets, especially if you're trying to get diverse groups, the ear training and just learning that way by the ear first. Really, it's, we have an old saying, it's just as you teach a child to speak before you teach them to read and write. We want our students to learn to speak on their instruments, because that's about the emotion and the passion and the things that, the techniques and the things that are just kind of dry about music. But when you pull it all together, there's some passion, there's some emotion in there, and that's what makes us human, and to be able to express that. And so the biggest, the vision that I'm so excited to be here, because, this beautiful struggle, we can now broaden our reach, and we're now here in St. Cloud, kind of experimenting as everybody else is. We're trying to figure out things as we go, but I have a wonderful team, and they're all over it. And that's why I was so proud of them when I said St. Cloud, and they said, yes, let's do it. I said, oh, okay. You guys are thinking a little bit differently these days. That's good. But yeah, it's going to be, we're not walking in here saying, okay, we're going to snap this and this is going to be wonderful and everybody's going to be happy. And no, it's like a pilot, you start off small and then you gradually build. Then when you get some success, you build on that success. And so the vision is about really taking all of our kids and really making sure that music is a need to have, not a nice to have. Music is foundational to learning.
Did that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Because we're out of answers.
Oh, I have an answer for everything.
This is basically extremely exciting to me. I'm a former choir teacher, and all my kids are in music and plays and everything like that. And, going back to what we have done as a district, my child who's going to be in, my youngest child's going to be in 9th grade next year, and when they were in the play at Westwood School at like 3rd or 4th grade, they were shy, they had no idea, then they got the lead. And they're like, Mom, what have I done? And now they've been in plays ever since then. They're doing a solo in the community choir this Sunday. They've really built their confidence through music, and it's been really beautiful. I think the way you described it as a beautiful struggle, this district is a beautiful struggle. Minnesota is a beautiful struggle in the same way that you're talking about. And I really love the ability here to experiment and then expand on what the wins are. And the truth is, there's going to be some failure. I just want to name that. We don't know the answers. And so there might be a little bit of failure, and then we come around and do the right, the next right thing. And we're doing it together, which I think is really great. The ear and eye training, I want to touch on two things. So the ear and eye training, I was in, piano lessons, I was in choirs, I grew up in church singing. When I went to get a music education and had ear training for the first time, no idea. I couldn't hear a note and know what it was. I had no idea how to harmonize without reading the notes on the page. And so it took me having to deconstruct my formal music education to actually learn that. And so what a gift we're giving to our students to be able to have that in their body and not just in their mind. The last thing I want to say is about that bridge from 5th to 6th grade. I think 6th grade, you're right on the money there, that's when we lose a lot of our kids. And so I don't know the answer, but it's that signups like you're talking about, specifically with counselors, and then how are we getting kids excited? But yes, it's 6th grade, but it's also, the bridge to there as well. So thanks for being here.
Thank you for being here. I have a lot of questions, and they are about the whole presentation. So I'm gonna start with the arts part. So the visual arts. I love the graffiti. I love what you have been showing, and I love all the samples that have been given and how the participation works in the community. I love that for that, and I love the theater part that you show us, and that was a great experience. I was almost crying when you got the quote from the teacher about the theater experience, about that week of theater, what it did to those kids, and what that week of theater had done to kids that were not able to talk and they were talking, that they didn't have friends and were in groups with friends, and all those little pieces. What I like to see more of, and I had been talking to Lori about when we talk about arts, and I think that you, Baxter, said it at some point, it's not the nice thing though, is what does it do to a student? And I had been talking to Lori about referring, I wanted to have the district and at some point telling us what is the rounded education that we're providing to our students. What does it mean to have a student prepared for life? And that's what I want to hear a little bit more around arts. What is that do? What does it do to the student to prepare for life? How does it provide stamina? How you could not read a book, but then you can read a script and then memorize it. How could you not being consistent in any of your class or any of your homeworks, but then you can sustain a play or being or having the discipline to practice for an instrument, or even for a song. How does it help to be part of a group, and how you can be part of those groups, and what is that giving you? And the one thing that I haven't heard you talk is about creativity. Where is the creativity being born? How the creativity gets developed? What, if I am not going to be in theater, what does that matter? What doesn't matter that I did all this before? If I'm going to be an engineer, as I study engineering at some point in my life, how these theater sessions will help me as an engineer, because they are helping me as an engineer. How is my brain developed? I want to hear more about that, and I want our community to hear more about that, because I do think that exposure that we're missing for our students is not supported by parents and by our community, because we don't really know what else is this doing. And we are only seeing that pretty sculpture or the nice poster or the nice painting that they did, and we don't see everything that is behind that and the hours of work that took to get to that. So I'm excited about what I have heard, and I would like you to take note, please, about those things to be coming up to the future. So I don't really have more questions about that. I'm going to, well, it was more a comment than a question. Unless you have anything to share, you want to say something about it. All right. So I like the different ways to learn. You were talking about creativity and the need to have and not a nice to have. And I will say that is not only about music, but it's also about every single piece of art is transforming and engaging. What I didn't hear enough is how are you working with our St. Cloud community, with that St. Cloud teachers and group for, I'm thinking that you are working, that your role is to work out of the job. And by that I mean, you're going to leave and we're going to stay. I want to know, how are we going to stay prepared when you leave?
I think the teachers who are on our committee that meets every other week, that has been a huge component of our conversation around professional development. I've been so excited to hear from our teachers around the reach. You know, it's a big reach that they really want to impact, but they're really owning, we want the opportunity to learn from Walker West. We want our students to experience what Walker West has to offer, but we want our teachers to have that opportunity to learn and grow, to see modeling, to do some side-by-side work. As we a perfect example of this is some of our secondary music teachers wanted to do some curriculum writing this summer on a songwriting course that we have. They saw some need to revamp that course and change it, and the conversation really was, we have to learn from Walker West before we do that work. We shouldn't do that this summer. We have learning to do so that we can grow. So I think that in our conversations and planning around the residencies haven't solely been focused on, this is a residency for students. Won't it be nice for students to have access to this great songwriting experience? It's been, what's the professional development for the teachers ahead of time so they understand that, the teacher moves? What is the experience for the adults and the students? And then what is the opportunity to go further? A component of our plan, which we didn't highlight here, is a funding source for guided professional development and curriculum writing with our teachers afterwards. And so as our teachers learn, Walker West also helps to provide an opportunity to guide our teachers in their curriculum writing and lesson planning going forward. Did I hit it?
Yeah, all right.
And the other thing that wasn't mentioned is that Diane has at least 40-plus years as a band director in an inner city school. And so she knows how to work with the students. And that's one of the reasons. And she's been partnering with us since I've been here, because I know she knows how to get in there, figure out what needs to be done, focus on the things that need to be focused. And you're right, there's that creative part of the brain, the right brain and the left brain, and the analytics and the creative piece that, that gets addressed in this. And like I said, Diane has kind of a framework for making sure that happens. And I'll let you speak for yourself, Diane.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on, I can't see your nameplate, but when you said yes, and you so eloquently said you had to deconstruct what you'd learned when you went. Because I, as a highly trained, Western-trained musician, for probably the first 20 years of my teaching, I taught like that. And then I got African drumming, and I got really turned on with it and really liked it for myself, and then I liked it to take into schools, and worked with a person that I'm still very close friends with. But the thing that changed me, and it changed my whole way I taught and the whole way I looked at kids, was when I started to see, through these African drumming classes that I taught, I started to analyze talent and assess talent in a completely different way. It wasn't that you're talented if you can sit down and read this music in front of you and good for you. But then there was this whole other level of talent that I discovered, and it was so rich, and and I discovered it all through the African drumming, modem, and so that to me was just such an eye opener, and it was so refreshing to see kids that I would never have thought, had talent. So the way that I learned to assess talent was so much different, and it widened the scope, and it just became, it was like the lights got turned on. So, but I had to deconstruct. I didn't throw it all out, but I certainly had to back off, because when I learned this whole new kind of music, I didn't have a piece of music in front of me, and the instructor said, "Those of you who read music the best will have the hardest time in here."
It's true.
And I was so arrogant, I was like, oh yeah, no. And then he was right. He was right. And because you just have to let go of so much stuff. But boy, is it worth it.
Thank you. The other part that I wanted to touch on is that, so back in the day, in the starting of humanity, you have a name and a last name. Actually, you had a name and then something else to tell you where you come from. And with the level of diversity that we have now, that's hard to tell. But Katia, your name sounds Russian, your last name sounds Spanish. I'm wondering, where are you coming from?
California.
I should have guessed that.
Yeah, no, I'm originally from the West Coast. What do you want to know?
So my point go to my next question. I heard you a lot of talking, I heard you, especially Baxter, talk a lot about diversity, but you talk about it in terms of black and white. And I want to know what happened with Latinos. Since your last name was Cardenas, I was going to address my question to you, but.
Well, I guess, the thing is that as we go through this journey, and let me just tell you a little bit of evolution of Walker West. When the school started in 1988, it's like the video said, the crack cocaine epidemic started right on that street. And we literally, Reverend Walker and Grant West were literally picking kids up off the street and said, come on, you come in here and you're going to learn some music, and taught them, the ear and the eye training. And so, with gentrification, and then also I-94, did whatever it did with the Rondo neighborhood, that neighborhood had declined. But then people started finding out the way we were teaching. It's that sauce that we're going to give you, the secret sauce that we're going to give you. Right. And people around the Twin Cities started coming to Walker West, and that's why we went from 100% black students to now we have, very diverse students. We're about 45% black, maybe about 40% Caucasian, and then the rest of it other. Don't have a lot of Latinos. We have some Indians. Asians, and we have a lot of Africans. So we have people from Somalia, not Somalia, Eritrea. Is it Eritrea, where we have the Hashels? Yes, right. And so, yeah, that's what we've kind of evolved in. But, the way we're looking at it, and I always hate to do the black and white thing, but it's about how do you engage students? How do you really get them to learn? And that's why we're here. We want to see if we can engage those students to be excited about the music programs at St. Cloud. And it's a different way of teaching. And you talked about deconstructing. I'm a classical trained pianist, and now I'm taking jazz and gospel. And I have to deconstruct. I'm having to throw away all the stuff I learned and really listen. I don't get sheet music. Mr. Duncan, who's my instructor, he's like, here, Braxton, I'm gonna play this. And then I said, oh, okay, all right. And then I got to pick it up. And so that deconstructing piece that Diane talked about, it's tough. But if you can get that from the get-go where you do them both, then you're in a much better position. And then, to me, it's about having not just, when I talk about we want Grammy Award-winning humans, music brings life skills like determination, tenacity, team building. We have 5 ensembles, and we have choirs. All of that takes teamwork. And when you're a good listener and you're playing music as a group, you really are listening to the other person, and you're doing it in a teamwork to really deliver joy to the audience. That takes a lot of listening. And that's what we bring that's really unique, is that we really want people to learn to work together, have tenacity, determination, set goals, and that's what music does. And you talk about being an engineer. The one gentleman that talked about music, his name is Kavyesh. He's an electrical engineer from India. And he's probably one of the best pianists in the country, period. But he's an engineer.
Yeah.
Have you heard, do you like salsa music?
Oh, yeah.
Do you hear Richie Ray and Bobby Cruz?
Yep.
If I'm not wrong, they are classically trained.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
And if I'm not wrong, one of these songs has Stravinsky on it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this. Just to show you how thank you all are, I'm going to ask for permission to tell you my last piece. And this is Walker West. Walker is giving us the air that we need to breathe and to spread the love that we haven't been able to express with kind souls and enthusiastic spirit to do the rhyme, to the rock, to wrestle with our emotions, to turn ourselves eloquent verses to sound out our own songs to then thrive and triumph.
Mic drop.
Yeah, drop the mic.
That's the dream.
That's beautiful.
Thank you, Monter.
Kind of a little bit more than just Walker. We had a long presentation, and you were talking about art galleries. I was in the Paramount the other day, and they have all sorts of high school art on the walls there. I saw nothing from District 742. Are we involved in that at all?
Yes. I've seen 742.
Have you? Okay, good. I'm glad. I know that for many years, we had the two high schools, and they would go back and forth and giving a musical. And I think that there's some changes coming, that each high school can do a musical a year. Is that correct now, or no?
It's been like that for several years.
Okay, good. The Great Theater puts on classes in a lot of our schools, but they also have summer programs. And I know some of them are at Sartell. Do we have any of the Great Theater summer programs in our school district?
So they use the Sartell facilities, but it's a great camp. So they basically, it's not sponsored by the school district. It's sponsored by Great. They just rent out the facilities, whether it's here or Sauk Rapids or Sartell.
Okay. So have they come to us at all, or, I mean?
Yes.
They have? Okay, good, because Dennis Whipple's no longer around.
No, they're in our schools. I saw some of our former students, Drew Erickson, if those of you who remember Drew, he was in all of the musicals. He was actually teaching last summer at Tech, so absolutely they use our facilities.
Okay.
They also host them out at Kennedy.
Is the city involved at all in these facilities, or like, do they work with Great Theater?
Scott, I'm a board member for Great Theater. If you want to talk to me after this meeting, we can talk about Great.
Okay, good. Sounds good. Do you teach quite a bit of the blues music in your group up there? I'm a fan of the blues.
Well, we go all across genres, and most of what we do is around both jazz, gospel, and classical. And a lot of times people don't even realize we have some of the best classical students in the Twin Cities. They all are playing first chair in the youth symphonies, and we teach blues. And somebody asked us if we're doing bluegrass. Well, we're not doing bluegrass yet. But yeah, we teach all of those because they all have kind of the foundational chordal structures that you normally would use to play that type of music.
Okay. You mentioned something about residency. What are you thinking about when you're saying residency?
Yeah, so when we talk about residencies, we talk about a partnership between a teaching artist and a school. And typically, as the organization, we will facilitate that conversation and find out from the school kind of who they're wanting us to work with and what type of programming that we might be able to offer, what type of artists they might want to work with. And then we kind of pair them with an artist that we think would be the best match. Also, the artist who's available. A lot of the artists we work with are in high demand and are working with a lot of other schools as well with their own curriculums. And so residency means artist, school, and typically they're doing visits over a certain amount of time, maybe over 6 weeks or 10 weeks. Maybe they come once a week. It was really exciting to see how you guys were doing a partnership with a theater company who it sounded like kind of took over for the whole week. I'd love to learn more about that because those are also what we call residencies, where you can come in and do really, really concentrated work with youth. And it's a commitment from the district, from the school, and from us to give the students this experience.
Okay. There's a difference between American blacks and immigrant blacks. And we have a lot of immigrant blacks up here, and I hope that you're aware of what you're getting into, because they are different, have quite a different background.
It's a beautiful struggle.
Well put, because it can be a struggle.
Yeah, and we're anticipating that it will be, but we're ready.
Okay. I'm a finance guy.
And I'm used to be a finance guy too, so.
Okay, how are we going to pay for this and what's it going to cost?
Is that my question or?
Wherever you like.
No, I think the superintendent should make that.
Yeah, that's true.
Did you want an answer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I couldn't tell if you were.
How are we going to pay for it? We vote funds on this place.
You do indeed, and we appreciate it very much. The board had set aside some funding, and so that will be used for part of the fee. And then we have, Amy, is it coming through ESSER? Title IV. I was close. I knew there was some funding outside of what's generated here. So Title IV, which is professional development.
Is it enough?
Yes, to cover the 3 years. Yeah, we would not have entered a contract with them without having the funding secured, rest assured. We got you covered here.
Oh, we gonna get paid. Wow, I thought we were doing this for free.
No.
Oh, well, like a true finance person. You go, Ann.
Well, she kind of answered my question. She still didn't give me any parameters. But, there's money there.
In the budget that you will see shortly.
Okay.
I mean, you won't see that specific line, right? It's rolled in there, but it is budgeted, accounted for.
Okay, that's important. That's my questions. Thank you.
Natalie?
Yeah, I just want to tell the Walker West folks too that like this has been a conversation. I mean, I've been on the board 5 years and it's been long before that. You know, when my parents come to see my kids in band or choir, one of their first things they always say is, you know, this doesn't look like your school.
Yes.
And the community knows that. So like that's the elephant in the room and that we're really addressing here. And so I'm so thankful that, you know, when we talk about these sort of beautiful struggles, we can have a heck of a lot of meetings about it and never get to the frickin' action on it. And so this is really beautiful to see that we're here already 1 year into the action. I wanted to say two more things. One was about, you know, it's that deconstruction. Sometimes I use the word decolonization in board meetings, and that's exactly what the deal is here, right? I was classically trained. I was in a Lutheran school, Lutheran choir background, you know, and so when I went to Atlanta Public Schools to teach, I failed miserably because I was not ready to teach the kids that were in front of me. And because I was taught one way of music, a very white way of music, a very highly, you know, it's privilege upon privilege. And so this deconstruction and this decolonization is what has to happen all over education, and it's great that we're starting with music, or we're doing music as well. Speaking of credit recovery programs, which I know we talked about a little earlier in our meeting, I think of that a little bit in music because one of the things that our music folks did in 6th grade and then 9th grade was try to get kids in band, not just at that 6th grade entry, but also in 7th and 8th grade, and tried like a beginning band model. It didn't work so well. I mean, it's great that we tried it, but like that's kind of the struggle of even if we don't get that bridge from 5th to 6th grade, you know, is there a way that we can do that credit recovery, you know, kind of thing? Like, can we teach in a week, you know, 2 weeks in the summer, somehow get kids to be able to then enter 7th grade band without lacking.
Right. When I was in St. Paul, after I retired, I worked at Central High School to help out. And one of the things that I did was we had a beginning 9th grade band it's complicated. We had it for, and there were certainly many kids that wanted to be in there. And many of them, the majority of them were kids of color who either played previously in maybe 4th or 5th or 6th grade, got kind of, I didn't like it anymore, came back to it. And so that, and that was kind of my baby, taking that, and that's always been kind of my thing, is to take the kids that are struggling and try to get them so that they can feel like they're part of that ensemble. Because it's like all of the inequities in education and in life. More legs up, let's make this work. I would say that it was, I would give it about a B+ for success rate. It wasn't like all of those kids that were in beginning band then just went on. But we had a significant enough number of them that we felt like it was certainly worth keeping the class and keeping my support. It all kind of always depends on who's at the helm. And not this helm, but the school itself, as to where the funds go and all of that. But it was a successful program. So I think it can be done, and I think and even at that 6th grade level, I think there needs to be so much extra legs up, just extra support in there to help those kids feel successful, because you're going to have kids that are just going to take off. And that's where the benchmark is going to be. And then you're going to have kids that are struggling. Maybe they can't practice at home. Maybe they, it's a whole host of things. And so that's why I think that all boots on the ground are really important at that early age. And I've never been able to, I've never been in a position or in a circumstance where we could really do that. Go into a system like this and say, develop a relationship with St. Cloud State or the high schools and say, can we get some mentors down here to have, if nothing else, just have them sit and play with the kids. Just play, if they can get some one-on-one or two-on-one or something like that. But, it's a lot of logistics, it's a lot of planning, but I think it can be done. It's one of the things that we are starting to talk about in this advisory team. It's not the only thing, because we are also talking about the programming that we do, which is the drumming and all the other classes that we've been talking about earlier. So there's a lot. There's a lot to this.
Thank you. The last thing I'll say is sometimes in this community, we have people come from the cities and tell us what to do and then leave and not work alongside of us. And so I think model than has been done before, and it's innovative. And I don't know a lot of other districts that are doing this sort of a thing. The struggle is similar in a lot of other districts.
Very
but
much.
Again, it's that you're here to identify and then implement, instead of just coming in and implementing cookie cutter things that don't work for the St. Cloud School District. So I really appreciate that. I could talk about this for hours. I need to just be quiet.
Well, I just sort of, as a parting thought, want to say thank all of you. I just thought we would just sort of take our 3 minutes plus and and walk out the door. But you guys are really, you want it. You want it in your schools, and I think this is wonderful. I only have the city schools and the city school districts to compare it to, and this is much more thoughtful and much more intentional on your part. So thank you for that.
And I also just want to add, it's been really great to see your presentation about the other fine arts engagement that you have throughout the city of St. Cloud, because that shows us that there's already a commitment citywide to commit to this type of work. And as we talk about what we're going to do after we leave and what you're going to do after we leave, there's already systems in place to be able to be successful in that. So let's just continue tapping into that and find out how this is different and can be even better.
Heather?
I was just going to comment and thank the district for their commitment. I know sometimes I've worked in higher education for almost 25 years, and we lose sight so often of the importance of music, and we've moved so much to education as a training ground for very particular jobs. And I wish I had the stats and this is many years ago now, but when I was visiting schools as a high school senior, I went to an institution or a college, and they talked about how they had done a postgraduate survey with their students. And I'm going to make this up a little bit, but you'll get the gist of it. And what their students said is that, 10 years after graduation, what they had reported is they wish they'd taken more business classes because they were at a point in their career where it was important to know accounting and finance and management. And then 20 years after they graduated, they said, we wish that we'd taken more psychology classes or sociology classes because we were at a point in our career where we needed to know how to make people work together and how to expand on just operational and thinking sorts of things. And then they asked them 30 years later, and they said, we wish we'd taken more history and arts and literature because we're at a point in our lives where we're trying to enjoy and understand how all of this comes together. And I think we forget that all of it comes together, and civic dialogue and just being able to talk to one another starts in all of these young classrooms, and how we present music and how we present the arts, and that it is important to understanding of the world. And so I appreciate the work that you're doing. I appreciate that the district is concerned about this, because it's certainly not easy. I was going to ask one question about if with Walker West being around since, I think you said 1988, what have you seen in terms of the impact of technology and with students and what these things have done to them? I mean, I recognize—
I like it done to them.
I recognize in my own boys that they have earbuds in their ears more, listening, so that they have probably more access in some ways, and whether it's Spotify or Pandora or Apple Music or whatever it is, there's podcasts, there's all of these sorts of things. What are your observations about what's actually happening? And then the last component I would just say is, I think to roll into all of this conversation is an understanding that potentially this also helps with mental health. And how do we keep that front and center in the conversation to find avenues? And then one last point, and I'll let you answer, but my other thing is, as you're looking at community partnerships, I know that the Cop House often holds sports, and I'm involved in athletics, but a lot of sport camps and opportunities for kids in the Southside neighborhood to get involved in that way. Has there been any exploration of music? And whether that's visiting residency sorts of programs, is it a Wednesday night open mic night? Is it, I don't even know if they have a piano in there, I haven't been there in a couple of years, but pianos, you can almost find people who give them away to get them out of their house. But is there an opportunity for us to look at some of that sort of programming with the Cop House, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and those sorts of things?
Oh, I'm glad, Heather, you mentioned the whole issue of maybe music and technology. And the most challenging program for us right now, and we actually got a $100,000 grant from the National Basketball Association Foundation, is our digital music production program. And I used to sell, in addition to being finance, I was a salesperson too. And I used to sell end-cap displays at Target and Walmart. And what is an end-cap display? It's a traffic builder, right? You walk there, you see the nice display, you pick a product off the end cap, then you walk into the aisle, and then you pick, that's how they pick your pockets, right? That consumer behavior. And so for me, the digital music production is like the end cap display. It's the traffic builder. You might not want to pick up a violin or an instrument, but you like music and technology. You might want to have some music underneath your rap and your lyrics. And so I see that as possible entryways to get kids engaged in music is through music and technology. And with that said, the person that's going to be running our digital music, that is running our digital music production program now is Katia. So Katia, I'll let you expand on it because you can get into the details.
Well, the most exciting thing I think about the idea of technology, mental health, what that means for our youth is what can it do for our youth, right? And so one of the most exciting opportunities about digital music production is that it's teaching the students how to use their iPads, their laptops, the things that they're already holding on to every day, and how to use that creatively, how to be able to express themselves using those tools in myriad ways, whether it's podcasts or creating their own songs or creating TikTok videos or whatever the heck they want to be doing. We are able to give them the tools to be able to do that. And we're able to do that to scale. So we're able to do that on GarageBand. We're able to do that at a more advanced level through Logic. And talk to some folks, there's conversation about which one's the top of the line. Some folks say that Logic Pro is taking over Pro Tools. Anyone who knows all that, you're probably as far in the weeds as I am. But what's really exciting about this is that it was designed exactly as I said, as an end cap display. This is an access-based program where we could go to sports team programs at places around the community and say, hey, you guys already have a room, you guys have already got a tech lab, let's bring digital music over here. We're talking to folks who've started esports programs, right? Well, music is a natural element of the video game world. How can we work together to build these skills for your students? So we're taking these technology focuses that we maybe see as detriments sometimes to these kids' success, even though they're going off and playing in tournaments and earning millions of dollars as young people. It's beyond me sometimes, but we know that they're excited, we know that they're engaged, and we know that there's ways to insert these things that we know are so important, like music and technology, and be able to use those together. And we never know how that's going to end up impacting a student, right? But we know that we can give them the tools to be able to figure out where that's going to go. And I think the best thing about this program too is that a lot of folks who are going to be drawn to it are students of color who are already not seeing themselves maybe in the more traditional routes to music performance, but this route could hopefully get them playing a piano, playing a guitar, singing, playing that really cool drum kit thing that goes right into the system. It's really cool. It's not even a real thing. You don't even hear it. It's wonderful. So we're really proud of that program. And as we are talking constructively through all the different solutions for what we're trying to address here, that's also something that we are keeping on the table as a possible option for things we could do with St. Cloud area schools. So we'll see where that goes.
I just want to bring one more voice, and I know it won't be long because she has to get home to her babies. But I wanted Barika to talk about the community piece that she's bringing to the advisory team.
I'm just going to speak very briefly because I just had a baby 5 days ago, and my husband is texting me that she's hungry. So the community partnership piece, what we're doing right now is we're working with our parent groups that are currently having parent meetings. So we had a Latino parent meeting that was held April, please, if I get the dates wrong, a lot on my brain. Yeah, April 17th, and we reached out to some of the folks within our community asking would they like to be a part of this this advisory committee. Then we reached out to our American Indian parent meeting committee as well. We had one parent who is signed up for that as well. And then we reached out to our African American parent meeting as well to talk to those folks about if they would like to attend. We had 2 parents that would like to participate. So what we're hoping to do is to bring some of those community partners and parents who have students within our district to really help us really strive and focus on how we want to move this work forward. With that being said, we also are talking to our local Boys and Girls Club, who have some amazing music programs already established, and then thinking about how can we connect our residents who will be working with our students in our district to those students, to the after-school programs that our students will be utilizing when they leave our buildings. And, sorry, I'm trying to think of everything. Oh, and our students, thank you. Yes, and then we reached out to our high school students, particularly our BIPOC students who have decided to stay within our programs. Why have you decided to stay? What was some supporting factors that made you stay? And then really getting them a part of that community as well. And that came about from the assistant principals reaching out to their music team, and then the music team identifying students that they felt would be able to advocate for the students that are younger than them. And if there's anything else, I would just ask that you just email Ayan, because my watch is going off and my husband is saying, crying face, I gotta go feed the baby. So.
Go, 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 go. Thank you, Marika.
Thank you, Marika.
I just wanted to say thank you for being here and caring about us. We have such a beautiful district that we love very much, and every year we have a fine arts presentation, but it's never left us with, I think, this positive outlook and excitement for our future. And this is very inspirational, and thank you for being here and helping us.
We're glad to be here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how we paired up on the fine arts and the budget together. On the opposite end here. So moving on to our preliminary 2023-24 budget. Joining us, Amy Scalarud, Executive Director of Finance and Business Services.
Oh, careful. I can do a condensed version if that's what the consensus is. No. Good evening, Chair Hawes, Superintendent Putnam, school board members. We are looking at the preliminary budget tonight. In the interest of really teeny tiny numbers, I'm not presenting on the screen. You do have a printed copy in front of you. It's much easier to go through on the paper numbers. The numbers get a little bit small, and then some of the pages rotate sideways, and then they're sideways on the screen. So you have the paper copy, and we'll kind of point out, or I'll point out as I go, kind of what page we're on. So, yep.
I have a question to start then.
Yes.
If it is not going to be on the screen, then it's not going to be on the telecast or the whatever you want to call it.
Right. It would be
So-
attached in the agenda for anyone who is watching.
Okay, so if someone's watching and they want to see what we're talking about, they should open up the
Yes, they should
document.
open up the attached
agenda.
document that's attached to the
Thank you.
agenda. That's the same document that board members have in front of them. Because even on the screen, the numbers get so small that it's generally not going to be legible for a lot of the documents. But yes, it is attached, and the page numbers are all in alignment, so they'd be able to follow along as we go.
Thank you.
So this is the preliminary budget. There is no approval tonight. This is informational. In the interest of time, we're not going to go through every page and every number. Certainly, there's a lot of information here. We'll hit kind of the high points, focus on the 23-24 budget, but we will point out, or I will point out a few things that may have changed or are significant as we compare the current year 22-23 to next year's proposed budget. So starting on page 3, this first page is just some general information on some significant budgetary trends. Here we talk about some of the challenges and uniquenesses that school funding bring with them, the fact that our funding is really legislatively determined and by and large out of our control. And then we also talk about some of the cross subsidies here, and we'll look at those numbers in a minute. I do just want to point out in the second paragraph there, you will see that there is a number highlighted. That is the per pupil funding amount. Because the legislative session is not yet completed, we don't yet know what that number is. So the number you're seeing tonight is the current year 22-23 per pupil amount. Before this comes back to the board for approval in June, we will know what that will be, and we will update that number. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware that that is not next year's number. That is current and will be updated before it comes back to the board.
And Amy?
Yep.
That's very important because there may have been an article posted online this morning that had the incorrect information, and if anyone got their information from that article, the article was incorrect.
That is correct. And we have communicated with that media outlet and given them the updated information so that they have correct information to republish and make sure that that we're not misrepresenting any information or creating any sort of confusion for our community members. On page 4, then, we look at our 2 cross subsidies, which is not new information or conversation to the board. We've talked a little bit about the special education cross subsidy already earlier tonight, but we have the special education cross subsidy, and then new last year we added the EL cross subsidy as well, and both of these are picking up some traction at the legislature in terms of funding, not fully funding. There aren't proposals out there right now that fully fund either. However, significant proposals compared to what we've maybe seen in prior years. But again, what might come of that is yet to be determined. And so what you see in front of you tonight as far as budget cross-subsidy reflects what we know today. What's approved as far as budget today. This current preliminary budget does not reflect any sort of estimated increase in funding for next year. It doesn't make any assumptions to that, and it doesn't allocate any funds to increase spending out of those potential new monies. Once we know what the outcome is, we would look at, as a district internally, administration, bringing forward a recommendation, probably in either June or July, to the board to approve some revisions and to allocate a spending plan or a budget revision for that new money. So as of the current funding scenario, the special education cross-subsidy for the 23-24 school year is estimated to be about $12.5 million. It's really kind of floated anywhere between that $11.5 and $12.5 million. Clearly absent some significant special education spending reductions, which isn't really a realistic expectation for 2 reasons. Number one, because we have students who have services that need to be provided, and also because we have spending maintenance of effort requirements. So absent new funding, we'll never really see that significantly change. But again, the hope would be that as we move to next year, we'll see some significant movement in that number. And then the EL cross subsidy is projected to be at about $3.7 million next year. And that one you can see over the 6 years presented has had a significant increase in that cross subsidy. And if we look back even further, if we go back 10 years, that cross subsidy was only about $1 million. So that cross subsidy has almost quadrupled in the 10-year timeframe, just due to increases in number of EL students, as well as just the level of service, having more students who are new to country, who don't have that formalized education coming in with them. So both of those, again, hopeful that we'll be able to see some movement on those numbers next year at this time. Going to page 5, there is some information at the top. And again, if there's questions, certainly feel free to ask. Otherwise, I'll kind of move move through and just kind of give a quick explanation of each of these, because there's a lot of data. And so we're not going to go through every district and every comparison. But the short story basically on the top of page 5 is if you look at the cost per student for administrative costs for St. Cloud compared to like districts with like enrollment, you can see that we're really on the low end of the per student funding, relatively compared to other districts of similar size. And again, you see per pupil administration spending as you compare all 4 years presented. Throughout the budget, you'll see really a lot of COVID-related impacts. This is one area where there really isn't. As a district, we did not utilize our ESSER funding for administrative costs. Those costs were really allocated to direct student supports. So elsewhere, when we look at per pupil spending, starting in 21-22, you start to see some jumps, and that is really not the case when it comes to administration. So just wanted to point that out. And then at the bottom of page 5 is our staffing ratios. The first line there is the instructional staff ratio, which is just primary classroom teaching positions. That would exclude special education and some of those other positions that are on the teaching contract but are support positions like counselors, nurses, social workers, those sort of additional support positions. The bottom, all licensed staff, does pull in those additional support positions, and you see a decrease in the ratio there, meaning we're providing more support staff. We have more staff relative to our number of students, and a lot of that decrease has to do with a combination of increasing compensatory funds over those years to provide those additional support positions, as well as some of those ESSER funds starting in 21-22 that have been used to support that. Moving to page 6, we look at enrollment. About 81% of our general fund revenue comes from various funding sources that are tied to enrollment. So enrollment is a huge contributing factor when we look at the budget. And so what we have here is a 10-year kind of snapshot with actuals through 21-22, and then our projected numbers for the current year and the upcoming 2 school years. Over the 10 years projected, you can see that we have dropped about 10%, with really the largest of that drop coming in 2021 during some of the pandemic period where we saw a lot more students utilizing homeschool and either homeschool or various online schools. As we look to 23-24, we are looking at a slight increase in enrollment for next year. And then the bottom of page 6 looks at our revenues. Again, with 81% of these approximately coming from per pupil. Typically, we see about 85% of revenue coming from the state. If you look at the charts for both 22-23 and 23-24, you see that those state resources are significantly less than that. That is directly related to 2 things. Number one, the increase in federal COVID relief funds, because as we're getting additional federal funds, it increases that federal percent, and then there's a corresponding decrease in the state funding. And then part of that for 22-23 was that drop in compensatory revenue that the board has discussed multiple times with the change in the free and reduced applications. We start to see that rebound as we move to 23-24 because we're back to having the kind of quote unquote normal process for meals and having those families fill out those applications. And we're seeing that compensatory revenue rebound. But because we still have one more year of ESSER funds in 23-24, we do still see that is less than it would typically be. We would expect that to move back to about that 85% as we get to 24-25. And then the other thing I'll note here is just to point out the property taxes. Property taxes makes up approximately 6% of our revenue. When we really look at the total general fund budget, that's a pretty small piece of what we fund. And so just want to point that out because I think sometimes there's a perception that that's the opposite, that a significant percent of our funding is coming through taxes, and it's really primarily coming from the state. And then page 7 just has, and this is again kind of what I referenced before, where the COVID relief funds really have impacted that per student funding. And this chart is a good representation of that. You can see starting in 2016-17, we had spending of about $12,600 per student. We're now up in 21-22 at about $15,600. And a lot of that is, again, because we have those additional one-time funds. And you see that trend when we look at the state averages, also with that significant increase, because a lot of districts are in that same position. The rest of this executive summary for the next few pages is just some background information about the various funds and what is accounted for in each. We're not going to go through all of that in detail, again, in the interest of time. And then pages 10 and 11 are really just a snapshot of all the funds. Again, we will look at each fund actually in detail, so we're going to skip over those pages, as well as the organizational section. The organizational section, which is pages 12 to 17, is just a lot of background information about board policies that have an impact on the budget process and the inputs to the budget, and how some of the things are reported. So that's a lot of really exciting reading that you are welcome to do on your own. And if you have questions, certainly feel free to reach out between now and June, when the budget would be approved. So really then, the bulk of what we want to spend our time on is the actual numbers, and those start on page 19. And so page 19 is the snapshot of the whole district. So the general fund, which is where the majority of the activity takes place, special revenue funds, which is food service, community service, and then our projects fund and our debt service fund. And so the general fund, you'll see if you look at the third from the bottom number, is really kind of the key number when we look at budgets. That's the surplus or the shortfall in a fund for any given year. The general fund, the board, typically the standard is that we approve essentially a break-even budget. And so you see a small surplus there of about $44,000. Then when you look at the rest of the funds, you do see that the rest of the funds have deficit spending for a variety of reasons, which we'll talk about as we get to each of those funds. All of those deficit spending are intentional, are planned, and are either board approved or by statute, again, for a number of reasons, and they're all coming from reserves. So it's not deficit spending, it's all things that are pre-approved. But again, we'll go through each of those in total. So the bulk of the district budget, about $164 million of our total spend, comes in the general fund. The general fund is broken into 3 separate budgets: the operating fund, transportation, and then operating capital. So the first of those funds is the operating fund, which is on page 22. So if you want to skip to page 22. And this gives both next year's budget, which again is what we'll focus on, the revised budget for 2022-23, and then 5 years of previous actual data. A couple things, I'm just going to point out the highlights, kind of the where there's big shifts or big changes, to make sure everyone's aware of the why. But again, if there are certain follow-up questions, we can ask those tonight, or again, can feel free to reach out between now and June. So in the revenue section for the operating fund, as we mentioned earlier, we're starting to see that shift in the federal. So we see our federal revenue drop from $32 million in 2022-23 to about $18.5 million in 23-24, as a lot of those one-time funds that were allocated for COVID start to drop off. And the 2 biggest areas where we had one-time spending in 2022-23 that goes away are going to be the recruitment and retention stipends that were approved as part of the negotiations for the last 2 years. That shows up on that second line in the expenditure section for district support services. So that's why you see a big drop from $7.5 million there down to about $4.5 million. That's because of those stipends. And then the other area where there's a big decrease is in the sites, buildings, and equipment, and that is the HVAC project for Talahi that was coming from the ESSER funds. And so that drops from about 12 million down to about 8.7 million. Otherwise, our expenditures by program are really fairly consistent from year to year. On pages 23 to 25, there is a much more detailed breakdown that further breaks that down into each category. Again, in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through that line by line because there really aren't a lot of significant variances other than the two that were just mentioned. But again, certainly if there's questions, feel free to ask. And then the bottom line for where we project to end the year for the operating fund is at about just under 21 million in fund balance. Of that, about 17.9 is in the unrestricted category, and that would put the projected fund balance at about 11.3%. And as a reminder, that board minimum in board policy is 10%. So we're still above that minimum fund balance policy level. And then going to page 26, this is the second component of the general fund, which is transportation. The transportation revenues and expenditures have increased as we look at kind of year over year, just as costs have obviously increased. But really, it's really relatively consistent from year to year. And we allocate enough of our gen ed funding to transportation between the special education and the gen ed funding. So while we talked earlier about the fact that there's some transportation cross subsidies that exist, that doesn't reflect as a deficit in the transportation fund. It's reflecting in the fact that we're allocating additional revenues, either allocating revenues to Fund 1 from the per pupil funding, or in some cases, we code certain transportation costs back to the general fund. So a kind of a combination of those. So it looks like we operate at a break even, and we do within the fund, but it's because it's being subsidized by the general fund or by the general operating fund. And then the last component of the general fund is on page 27. That's the operating capital portion. One thing to note there in the revenue section, we don't typically have federal revenue coming into operating capital. Operating capital is primarily per pupil funding that's tied to levy and state aid. However, there was ECF funds, emergency connectivity funds, which were separate from ESSER funds, but kind of another pot of federal COVID relief money that was available the last 2 years. So we did have about $1 million each year in 21-22 and 22-23, and those funds are now gone and expired, and so you see no budget in 23-24 for that. The one thing I will note on this fund is you will see a deficit in the readopted budget for 22-23. That is related to the board authorized spending for the Apollo Stadium project. So a portion of that was approved to be coming from operating capital, and so that is why we see the deficit there. Next, we move into our special revenue funds. We have 2 special revenue funds, food service and community service. We will look at food service first, which is on page 30. So the food service fund, I would say, probably has the most drastic impact in terms of skewing numbers when we look back for the next how many years related to the pandemic and the shifts in funding. So when we look at the revenues and the expenditures, 2021, we just really saw kind of an overall decline because we had periods of distance learning where students weren't eating, a significant drop in just the total meals served and the amount being spent. Then in 21-22, we kind of had the extreme opposite of that, where meals were free for everyone, and we had the highest revenue and spending that we've really ever seen because of that. And then going to 22-23, we're kind of in the middle, where we went back to, again, sort of a quote-unquote normal or pre-pandemic way of doing business, where meals are free and it's federally funded if you qualify for free and reduced lunch. Meals are paid for those who don't qualify. And then moving to 23-24, we see that shift once again as we have the budget reflect the universal meals bill, where there's really minimal sales revenue coming in, and that's coming in through all state and federal funding. You also see the food service fund having a deficit spend down in both years. That is an intentional spend down. That is for one-time costs. We're purchasing a variety of equipment items, and that's really due to the amount that the fund balance grew during 21-22 when we had that significantly higher revenue than we were anticipating. And the state actually sets a threshold of, typically they want to see no more than 3 months worth of expenditures in your fund balance for Fund 2. And if you exceed that, then they want a plan submitted with an intentional spend down to get it under that. We are currently over that. However, the state has increased that cap to 6 months, knowing that almost every district in the state is in this situation where they have all this money that came in that they really weren't expecting. But we are intentionally spending that down, and we expect by the end of next year that we'll be under that 3% limitation. And then moving to the other special revenue fund on page 31, that is the Community Education Fund. This fund, really the activity is much more consistent year over year. There really wasn't any sort of significant COVID funding coming in through this fund or anything that's changed significantly. The only thing I'll point out here again is the deficit spending. And again, that was the intentional board-approved deficit spending related to primarily related to that project at Apollo. In addition, there is also in 23-24 a levy adjustment, and that is related to our after-school care levy. Those funds are set and levied and collected in advance, and we set a particular dollar amount. And during the pandemic years where we were in distance learning for periods, we didn't incur as much cost, and so we had more revenue collected than associated costs we paid out. That money is sitting in fund balance, and the state will do levy adjustments to recapture that. So that is making up a portion of next year's deficit as well. And our community education fund balance as of the end of 21-22 is sitting at about 50% of expenditures, which is a pretty significant balance reserve amount, which is part of that reason for that spend down.
We do that on purpose, though, in case there's any changes to the early childhood programming, is that correct?
So a portion of it, the 50% does include about, I don't have the number off the top, I believe it's about 800,000 that's for school readiness.
Right.
And that will become probably a topic of conversation for the board after this legislative session. I suspect there's a high likelihood that those VPK seats that are set to expire at the end of this school year will be renewed to permanent funding. So then that becomes a question about are there one-time costs for curriculum or professional development or something specific to early childhood that the board would want to allocate those funds for. Knowing that it's one-time money, right? It's hard to spend that to expand programming because that's not a permanent solution. But again, that will be a conversation once we know if those seats are expired. But that is a portion of that fund balance is specific to that and was an intentional buildup in case those seats expire. The next fund on page 35 is the debt service fund. I missed the fund, skipped the fund. Page 33, capital projects fund. So this is the project or the fund that's used to account for any activity for any sort of projects that are funded by debt issuances. And so what we have in this fund for 22-23 and 23-24 is primarily the HVAC projects. You'll see in 21-22, there was about 15 million in bonds that were issued to fund those projects. Those projects are happening this summer at Discovery, Oak Hill, and Apollo. And so those that will spend down the remainder of those funds. And then there's a little bit in there still remaining from the tech bond that was allocated to the board that's still kind of getting cleaned up and spent. And then there's also a loan repayment line. That is still money that is sitting in an escrow account from QuaryView that cannot be spent on anything else. And it has to be taken back essentially through levy adjustments. And that's done over a period of years. And so that will eventually, over the next, I believe it's 6 years, take away the rest of that balance that remains in that fund balance. And then the last of our kind of traditional operating funds is the debt service fund. This fund is really just used to account for the levy and the funds collected to pay for any current debt that's been approved and issued, and then to make those payments. Right now, our debt service fund is in a little bit unique situation because we did a refunding of the tech bond, the 2017 bond last year. So in 21-22, you see there's revenue coming in of about $75 million, and that's sitting in fund balance. However, that bond isn't callable, what we refer to as callable, meaning it's not able legally to be paid off yet. It's what we call an advance refunding. So right now we have both issuances out there. One of the issuances relating to that project gets paid out of the annual levy that's in the revenue section. The other gets paid out of that fund balance that is sitting in those proceeds that were issued until that call date, and it can be repaid in full, which is 2026. So again, it looks like there's a large deficit in there, but that is intentional. That aligns with the parameters of that refunding, and that's how legally we account for it. We will skip pages 36 and 37. You'll see there's no recent activity. That is the fund that used to account for our scholarship activity, and then there was a change in guidance from MDE and a change in accounting principle that now requires that to be rolled into the general fund, so it's not its own fund anymore. But we've got 3 more years before that drops off on the historical comparative information. And then the last of our funds is on page 39, and these are our internal service funds, and these are used to account for various employee benefits, primarily dental and health insurance. All 3 of those funds are sitting with healthy fund balances, and the amounts budgeted and the activity is really very consistent with previous years, so we won't spend a lot of time on those. And then starting on page 43 is the informational section. And I'm not going to go through every item in here. The first item in there is enrollment information. We already kind of talked about that in a summarized format. The chart on page 44 just really gives a much more detailed by grade level breakdown of that historical and projected enrollment information. Page 45 is the levy comparison. The only thing that I'll take a second to note here is just to point out the tax rate, what has happened historically to the tax rate, which is kind of about 3/4 of the way down on the table. You see the tax rate in 1920 was about 27.8%. As we have seen the tax capacity within our jurisdiction increase, because of the way districts levy, and we levy a dollar amount, not a rate. Our tax rate actually has gone from 27.8% to about 22.7%. And that's distinctly different from a city or a county, where when there's a significant increase in valuation, their rate stays the same and it affords them the opportunity to bring in new revenue. We get the same amount of revenue, and it just lowers that rate. So. And that's something that we discuss every year in the fall when we do the levy presentation as well. And then page 46 is just a chart showing the comparison of staffing levels. We are looking at an increase in staffing going into 23-24, and it's primarily coming in teachers. And teachers, again, encompasses all positions that are on that teaching schedule. So that can be social workers, nurses, special education teachers. And so there's some increases in a variety of areas within our teaching staff. And then really the most significant increases coming in the paraeducator, paraprofessional line, as we're able to start having a better ability to fill those positions. We're increasing that to reflect the student need in the hopes that we'll be able to fill those positions. So that's really primarily the two areas where we're seeing the increase. And then the last two areas I'm not going to spend time, or the last 2 pages I'm not going to go through. There's a 5-year activities comparison. There's really nothing drastically that's different from year to year. It's really very comparable and consistent information. And then the last item on page 48 is the curriculum review cycle, which if you have questions would not go to me anyway. So if there's questions on that, that would be a Kay question. So that is a lot of information, I know. And so we can, again, certainly if there's specific questions this evening, there is no approval tonight, so it will come back in June.
I have a question regarding, you said that there were still funds available from Quarry View that will be paid back to,
Yes, there are still funds sitting in escrow, and because that,
what was the amount on that?
it's about after next year, it'll be about 1.4 million. And because that was a project that was issued through a COP, a certificate of participation through lease levy, those funds are very different than a voter-approved bond issuance, where if you have projects, or if you have funding remaining, you can reallocate it. Because it's tied to a specific project under the lease levy authority, anything that's not spent on that facility can't be spent for anything else. It has to be spent on the project that was submitted. The preference of MDE was actually to recoup all of those funds at once, which would have caused our levy at the time to go down in 1 year by $1.8 million, which would have created a big drop 1 year and a big increase.
Next question then would be, if we have those dollars available there, and we're talking about the, I get all our schools messed up, let's see, the McKinley addition going, and the possibility of using lease levy for a portion of that, would we be able to refund those dollars in 1 year, but then issue
So
McKinley with having zero tax impact?
So it gets a little bit messy because what you fund for lease levy is the annual principal, and I don't know, because they're two different issuances, I believe under the lease levy authority, you'd still have to treat them separately. However, having that negative levy adjustment.
That's what I was suggesting, though, is keeping them separate, but doing it at the same time, the same year, so that you'd have the refund and then the reissuance.
I think the challenge is that when we issue the lease levy, you don't levy for the issuance all at once. You only levy for the principal and interest that year. And I don't know if the lease levy authority allows you to levy the whole amount at once. It's a levy for the annual principal and interest. So they would probably both sit out there in parallel. However, the fact that we have that negative adjustment is really what's giving us some room back in our lease levy authority, because we were at our cap prior to those adjustments starting to take.
And at MDE, there's just no way to take something that you're holding in reserve from a previous issuance and transfer it over to another.
No, because we said if we have another project that meets the lease levy, authority and guidelines, can we repurpose them? And they said no, because that particular issuance is tied to the review and comment that was submitted for that particular project.
Okay, and are we 100% sure that we've done everything that we need to do at Quarry View before we, have we?
Yes, and we actually had that balance. The levy adjustments just started this year, and part of that was making sure that there wasn't, anything else that needed to be done. The other challenge with certificates of participation in lease levy is that it really can only be used for the adding of the square footage and the construction of the building. It's really not allowable to be used for furniture or instructional materials or any of those supplemental
No, but
things.
construction costs it is.
Yeah, it's just construction costs, yeah. But yeah, there were some things that we went back and did and made, updates to at Quarry View a number of years ago, some of that site work, and some of the outdoor lighting and some of those things that kind of came up
Yeah.
later after the fact that we did tap into those resources for, because they're an extension of the building.
There may be a couple other things that should be touched. We can talk later.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed that we have an increase in staff at the same time as we're having a decrease in enrollment. Why?
And so we're actually not projecting a decrease in enrollment for 23-24. We are projecting a slight increase in enrollment. And a big driving factor of that is the increase in funding. So as we've seen our compensatory revenue go back up, that compensatory revenue is predominantly used for staffing. And so that's where the increase is coming from, is from primarily those compensatory funds that are really targeted for those additional support positions for students.
Thank you.
Amy, we appreciate you. Okay, then we're moving on to schools update. Kate Nelson, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, and Dr. Mike Rivard, Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education.
Good evening, Chair Hawes and members of the board. This evening, we're going to do a schools update for the month of May and probably go back a little bit for the month of April too. We will start out like usual with our preschoolers. Often I like to highlight the wonderful things happening with our 4-year-olds, but this month I'm going to talk a little bit about our 3-year-old preschoolers at Quarry View. What you're seeing is our youngest learners, and they're exploring many different things this month, and I'll try to explain some of them because some of them are a little bit difficult for me to understand when I was over and I had to get some explanations. What our children are learning about are how to milk a cow in the classroom up in that top left-hand corner. We're doing many more construction activities over in the top corner. Down below, there was actually a conversation about science and the scientific method as the children were learning how to blow bubbles and realizing that they were actually creating the energy to blow those bubbles. As you go across, the children created their own kites, but part of the conversation was talking about the wind and how the wind was able to aerodynamically bring the kites up into the air, and to see 3-year-olds understanding that was truly remarkable. And lastly, probably my favorite picture, maybe one of my favorite pictures in my career, is the students in the middle who are learning how to roller skate, but more importantly, they're learning how to be a friend when we need to help steady ourselves. All lifelong skills. Last week on Friday, 5th grade mathematicians were in this very room working on or competing in our annual Masters in Math competition. Students will compete in fact drills, individual rounds, and team competition. We're thankful to our talent development and accelerated services teachers for their work in creating and working with these teams. Clearview Elementary School did take first place, and that was the first time they were able to do that. They're pictured in the lower right-hand corner, but we do congratulate all of our participants and having them join in this activity. It was wonderful to have buses available and to make sure that this could happen. Ms. Debner was also very much involved in having this occur for our 5th grade students. This past Monday night at Oak Hill, they had their family engagement night. Fun and engaging learning activities were happening in the hallways, gymnasium, and media center. A special guest appearance and was brought in from the Hemker Zoo and the Wildlife Service Center with owls, turtles, and a snake in the middle corner, in the middle picture there, for students to see and with their families around and learning about animal habitat. In the top front, or excuse me, in the top right-hand corner, our students were able to pick out books from the District 742 bookmobile and bring those books home as part of our Title I Family Engagement Dollars. And in the lower left-hand corner, We thank Assistant Superintendent Nelson in making sure that our Tech National Honor Society was partnering with us at Oak Hill that very evening and facilitating activities for our little ones. A lot of those were former Oak Hill students. I'd like to take pleasure in announcing that more than 700 families and student members were at this evening event. That is probably a record, and I'm very proud of our Oak Hill community for having those kind of numbers come out for a family engagement night. At Madison, we're celebrating our kindergartners. In Miss Grindy's class, our students spent time working on their writing skills and becoming awesome authors. You see that in the top left-hand and middle picture. In those pictures, those kids had spent time putting their writing together and then having a publishing party, and then they got to bring all their writing home to share with their families. To the right and bottom, we see our kindergarten choir concert. Parents were treated to a fun evening of music, and part of the time was a candlelight concert. I'm continually wondered and just extremely proud of Mrs. Cruz and Mrs. Ryan as they put on a wonderful and innovative shows each and every time. At Kennedy, we see our students in these pictures benefiting from one of our District 742's many partnerships. Our kindergartners in Ms. Hofforth's class are using tools that were provided to them through a LEAF classroom grant. Because of the donation from from LEAF, students are participating in enrichment activities with woodworking and a wellness center. And you see those pictures, those three pictures on the left-hand side. To the right, though, I spent some time in this fourth grade classroom because I saw mini golf going on, and I thought, I need to know what that's about. But what they explained to me was that the mini golf course was actually an experiential learning science activity where the students were measuring the force and velocity of the golf ball as it went through those tubes. We certainly have some amazing teachers and creative things going on in District 742 at Kennedy. This past month at Discovery, they had their normal community event called their Huyo Hour, and Huyo meaning Somali for mother. This family engagement event was well attended, with a focus this evening being on literacy and celebrating our diverse community. Abdi Mahad, a local children's book and curriculum author, was the guest speaker. Free books were written by Abdi were provided to every family, along with a meal of Somali tea and sambusas. Lastly, we are continuing our preparation for the 2023-24 school year with kindergarten open houses occurring at all of our elementary buildings. Our Welcome Center and building staff are welcoming families and their soon-to-be kindergartners to an evening of exploration, answering questions, and of course, filling out forms. That concludes my elementary report for this past month. Ms. Nelson?
All right, we are going to move into our secondary schools. Of course, there's always at South. The pictures on the left indicate South fundraised just over $700 in the Pennies for Patients Challenge, and the money that the students raised was donated to the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. As you can see in the bottom photo, the event culminated in the live streaming of sliming Mr. Heitkamp and Miss Ives. So kids got that reward. That was pretty neat. And it took a while, but our spring sports are finally in full swing. We did have a chilly start to the season, as shown in the photos on the right-hand side of our South track team. The weather has improved. Today was a beautiful day, and Mr. Klug's science class has been outdoors enjoying the sunshine and collecting data on energy absorption. On our north side, we have another showcase of our visual arts program shown here. Students at North are learning about pop art, and they've been painting ceiling tiles that will be displayed in the classroom for years to come. Art teacher Joy Christensen, who is retiring this year, has been doing this project for the past several years and has a classroom full of such tiles. It's just another great way we showcase our student work. Last week at North, students who met their no tardy goals were treated to a tardy party. Fun was had by all with games, face painting, and a bounce house. You may recognize a guest principal in the upper right-hand corner as Principal Nikki Hansen joined the North crew and donated her mad face painting skills to add to the entertainment. Kennedy Middle School students enjoyed celebrating Earth Day, and they worked hard. They made t-shirts. And so each student ended up with a t-shirt that they probably displayed, and Ms. Loso provided all the materials and led the students through the project. As we move into our high schools, you may recall Principal Sininger telling you about Saeed Abdi, a senior at McKinley ALC, during his school presentation last month. At that, Saeed was just about to enter as a finalist in the Fast Lane 94 Trailblazer Challenge, which is an entrepreneurial competition. So I'm excited to share that he took second place, and that qualified him as a semifinalist for the Minnesota Cup at this Carlson School of Business, which is held at the U of M. So at this level of the competition, he will present his idea. He will attend a meet and greet with a lot of heads of Minnesota businesses. And if he is a finalist at this stage of the competition, he could be eligible for multiple awards and a grand prize of $100,000. So wishing him the very best. All right, and staying on our north side, Apollo High School held their spring theater production last week under the direction of Linda McGowan. Junior Senator featured 21 actors and many students behind the scenes doing costuming, sound production, prop and scenery creation, and stage managing. And staying in the entertainment, go back one. There we go. Staying in the talent show and entertainment business here, Apollo had their spring talent show last week, which featured dancers, singers, gymnasts, and even a tug of war. I'm not sure how that qualifies for talent, but I think they had a lot of fun. But like South, the culminating event, go to the next one, was Principal Scholarud getting pied. And all those photos are courtesy of Ryan Unger. He caught that moment just perfect. And at Tech, Tech has done it again. The Tech Morning Show had brought home some Emmys in the Upper Midwest competition. Our Tech Morning Show beat out over 140 competitors, winning awards in special effects, cultural arts and entertainment, the talent and music categories. And on the right-hand side, community service is a big part of our National Honor Society work, and we had 20 NHS students from Tech brave freezing temps to support the Earth Day runners in St. Cloud on April 22nd. And to close today, I wanted to highlight a couple of district-level events and happenings that were going on. So this page, it's a huge congratulations to several of our students who were awarded the St. Cloud Building Youth Award by Mayor Dave Kleiss. We had 5 winners. We had one student who was not photographed, and that was Fatuma Ba, but we had Falliston Kunau, who was the 2023 Central Minnesota Boys and Girls Youth of the Year. Olivia Bowerly was the 2023 High School Big Sister of the Year for Big Brothers Big Sisters of Central Minnesota. India Ratha was named one of more than 5,000 candidates in the 2023 U.S. Presidential Scholars Program. Hannah Schindler was awarded for being the founder of the Interact Club with Rotary Club. And last, Fatuma Ba, who is not shown there, was awarded because she has done so much volunteering in the community. So that's a huge hats off to those young people. And at our next school boarding, you are going to hear from our Director of Innovation, Ryan Cox, our Tech Integrationist, Katie Herbold, and 2 students about our first Imagine 742 Student Voice Initiatives. So I won't give you too many spoilers, but I just had to give you a little snippet. In a brief synopsis, students generated a host of ideas for things they felt would improve the student experience. And then students had the opportunity to vote on those ideas, and then a smaller group, which is shown here, met to go really deeper into the issue and ultimately generate solutions. The students then attended our cabinet meeting, which are the bottom 2 pictures, last week to present their ideas to cabinet. And as Al alluded, the topic was parking lot fees. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and you'll be hearing more from the students at our next meeting. And finally, on April 28th, we held our second Excelling Student Awards ceremony at Apollo High School. It was an absolutely beautiful event that let our students and staff shine. Awards are granted to students who they're selected by their English language teachers from each school site. So every building got to go up on the stage. The students are selected based on their demonstrating excellence in English language progress, their dedication to academic achievement, and all-around good character. And this last slide just shows a few more pictures of our amazing multilingual learners, as well as a Somali dance troupe from Minneapolis who provided entertainment to cap off the evening. And Dr. Rivard and I enjoyed that very much. It was really cool. And that is our schools update.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, our evening would not be complete unless we did a few policy reviews. So we have two of them tonight. First, the second reading for proposed revised board policy 101, legal status of the school district. And Dr. Mike Rivard, I believe you have both of these.
I do. So good evening, Chair Haas, Dr. Putnam, and members of the board again. We have two policies. These are our second reading. Board Policy 101, legal minor changes, and from last school board meetings, there was no recommendations for additional changes.
Thank you. And then second reading for proposed revised board policy 103, which is expressions of concerns, complaints, conflicts about District 742 employees.
Thank you again, Chair Haas. Again, no recommendations came from the full board at our last meeting. So this is the second reading.
We all good there? All right. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn tonight's work session.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye. All right, work session is adjourned. It is 9:45 p.m. Have a good night. Thanks for watching.